But you have a right in this country to own your own home and to have a husband if you're a man or a wife if you're a woman, and to live as a married couple under our government. And I support your right. I don't support what you do, but I support the fact that you have freedom to do it. And the problem in our country, and even in our church, is these minorities with people who want to do these things want to force the rest of us to accept it. And that's the problem. You don't have a right in your freedom to force me to make it normal in my life. But as much as online is a component of higher ed, and I think we have to have it at the seminaries, we have to have it at the universities, people still want to be together. I mean, people still want to look at each other. They want to be in the same room. If there's one thing I learned about COVID is we were foolish. We were foolish to believe the myth and the lie that we can't be together. Human nature is we want to be together. And so while I believe we have to offer these things, residential education, both at the seminaries and at our Concordias, is not going to go away. And I don't think it's going to go away in higher ed. There are some guys I know to this very day, they've been in the ministry 15, 20, 30 years. Every time they climb into the pulpit, it's a terrifying event for them. Others, it's like putting on a pair of shoes and going for a walk. It's natural. I don't think either way is good, right, or wrong, or bad, or indifferent. I just think it's the gift God gives you. And so we all have our struggles and our failures. And when it comes to pastoral leadership, it's best to identify what your failure is and build some strength around you to help either modify your own self or put people in places that can help your deficiencies.
We've got a quick update for you on the Lutheran Institute of Theology, or LIT. First off, we've got all of our resources put together. So we've got a professional brochure that we can send to your church that will give them all of the information that you need in order to decide if you and your church want to participate in the courses that we're putting together on LIT. Second, because of donor support over the last couple months, we are very excited to announce that we can offer 50% off for the first 100 churches that sign up. So that's why we want to get these resources into your hands as quickly as possible. Here's the catch, though. Because of a website malfunction, we lost all of our emails that we had leading up to about 10 days ago, which means we lost about 1.2 thousand emails. So if you went on our website and submitted the email in our form, which is found on the Institute side, we lost all of those emails. So please go back and put your information in there again, or you can simply reach out to me at bryan.stecker at ontheline.net. But I would recommend just going to our website, putting your information in there, and then we can send you all of that information along with the upcoming updates as we look forward to our release. So thank you for all of your support, and God bless.
Christmas, okay, you can set it aside because it's a one-time deal a year. But Holy Week has multiple events that occur during Holy Week. And to glorify Easter Sunday and to forget that Friday is the pinnacle of our faith, it just, and so this is where the Roman Church actually has us. They have us because in some respects, they deify Good Friday it's mass. They're killing Jesus every time so I don't agree with that, but I'm just saying they have us on this because they understand that the death of Jesus is the centerpiece of Christian faith. Yeah. That is the center. The resurrection is nothing more than a continuation of the power of our God. As if in some way that if you had to die first before, and look at the Apostles' Creed. Where is the first stage of exaltation in the Apostles' Creed? Here's your catechism quiz. You ever seen that NIV study Bible? They have a diagram of the humiliation of Jesus. First stage of humiliation is incarnation. The first stage of exaltation is the descent into hell, post death. You see, death was the pinnacle of the beginning of Christ's exaltation. And then it rises itself to the pinnacle of ascension, but ultimately the first stage of exaltation is descent into hell, which is the first act of Jesus post death.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these are the kind of things that it gets me cranked up.
Yeah. Are we live, by the way? We are live. Okay.
I figured that's what, Bennett over here was taking care of all that.
You never know. So he's always just kind of he'll like peek up every once in a while.
I figured.
Like, what's he doing over there?
That's right. I figured. That's why I just kept going.
He's like a good magician over there.
Yeah.
He's just he's at work. Well, Dr. Jamison Hardy, thanks for taking the time to come out here.
Really good to be with you. Appreciate the invite.
So we got a bunch of things to talk about. Should we try to break the record, by the way?
Whatever you want.
Okay. The record, I think, is it still Coons? 3.5 hours.
Well, if it's my buddy Adam Kuntz,
Yeah.
as I like to call him, then that's a competition. I'd say yes.
Yeah.
I love that guy. He's English district. I
Yeah.
got him back. He was out in Lancaster, Pennsylvania when we got him out of seminary. I was vice president of the region.
Mm-hmm.
And then he ascended to the holy office of professor at Fort Wayne. But he maintained his English district membership.
Oh,
And,
did he? Yeah.
of course.
Did he go to Redeemer? Or?
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, once you're English district, you don't want to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went out to my college or seminary classmate Adrian Sherrill's church out there in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
I was at his installation. That was magical. I got to go out there for that. And then we had an open vacancy there at Redeemer in Oakmont, and they called a number of candidates. And finally, I called Adam. And I said, you ready to get back into the saddle in a parish? And he said yes. And so we got the call. He took it.
He's loving it.
He's outstanding. I love that guy.
He was a blast. He was out here about a month ago recording. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a beautiful church, Redeemer in Oakmont. I've been with that church for 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
They got a nice K-8 school, K-12, sorry, the K-12 school. And he's perfectly fit for that church. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
Mm-hmm. So for those that don't know, the English district is throughout the whole country.
Yeah.
Right?
So
It's
English district was brought into the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod in 1911.
Mm-hmm.
It was previously its own synodical denomination. And for 3 conventions prior to 1911, our brothers, the Germans in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, denied the English district membership because
They were English speaking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, in good German fashion, the Missouri Synod folks said, we have to speak English and do missions. So you English people, do that. So in 1911, they brought us in. And a couple kind of interesting facts, I guess, I would share about the English district. The English district is responsible for several things that you would know about today, such as the Lutheran Witness. I don't know if you...
That's English district.
It was originally...
Okay.
And when we became the English district became part of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, the president of the denomination was also the editor,
Mm-hmm.
and they gave it over to the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod because he couldn't do everything, and he was parish pastor and all these things. And in 1911, once we became a district of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod kept us as our own district, which we became a non-geographic district. And so today we have 165 congregations in 22 states and in the Ontario province of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And so when LCC was a district of the Missouri Synod, English district had churches up there in Ontario specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And when LCC got its own denominational affiliation, they had the choice to stay with LCC or to come to the English district.
Mm-hmm.
Or excuse me, stay with the English district or go with the LCC.
Lutheran Church Canada. Right?
Correct. And so we have 12 to 14 congregations that stayed with us. I won't go into all the details, but there was a protocol document where we had to annually encourage them to go back to LCC. And we've gotten that all taken care of under my bishopric for 9 years, President Harrison and President Teuscher. We had some annual meetings. We really got some strong fellowship, got it all fixed. And I think there's a strong partnership today. But so English is non-geographic along with SELC, the Slovaks.
Mm-hmm.
And we are the 2 non-geographic districts. We have a lot of overlap. So SELC district is east of the Mississippi. English district has 3 circuits in California, 2 circuits in Arizona. We have churches in Idaho, Washington. Then you come to the east and you got into Nebraska, Missouri, Minnesota. We have 2 churches here on the greater outside of Minnesota, Minneapolis. Then you get into Wisconsin. That's the largest circuit we have is Milwaukee. And then the strength of the English district is around the lakes. So you have Indiana, northern Illinois. Chicago was the stronghold for English.
Okay.
So during Seminex, we lost half of our churches to the Seminex split.
Mm-hmm.
And so the English district in the 70s was one of the most liberal districts in the Missouri Synod. I mean, they were main players in Seminex. And the English district bishop at the time could have been one of those that Preuss took out.
Mm-hmm.
That's that was one of the problems because they were that bad. Well, in a successive move from 1996, I think Roger Patelko became bishop in the late 80s. His bishop died and he succeeded as first vice president. But starting with Roger Patelko, who, by the way, taught at Fort Wayne Seminary for my years in the late 90s for a couple of years, he started the movement back towards kind of more confessional Lutheranism in the English district. He served for a 9-year term, and then David Ritt took over, who was the bishop I had. And David did a very good job at maintaining the English district as a confessional district. And then my predecessor, Dave Steckholz, took over, and we really kind of made a hard move towards more confessional. And then I spent 9.5 years as bishop, and the English district today is, I would say, one of the 5 conservative districts. I mean, really conservative districts across the district lines. And it's really a beautiful situation because it's in 22 states in the U.S. So it's really a microcosm of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. So I have churches in San Francisco. One of my, I shouldn't say it that way, I'm not bishop anymore. The English district has churches in California and in San Francisco, West Portal Lutheran, huge school of predominantly Asians and very liturgical. That is where Dave Steckholz, my predecessor, served as pastor. And there's a couple other congregations in that greater San Francisco area, just beautiful confessional, very Lutheran churches. And then you have a big circuit down in Tucson, Arizona, and Phoenix. You start in the city of Phoenix and you move up the mountain all the way up to Pine Top, Arizona, where they get snow. It's 110 down in the valley, and you get up to Pine Top. And there's churches at each city along the highway route up there. So the English district is really it's a beautiful district. I love being a member of the English district, and it has a storied history. In 1911, we became a district of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And when you look at it from the standpoint that the Missouri Synod was founded in 1847, that's not that long of a time from the founding to the English district.
So how long has it been since you've been a president?
So I was elected in 2015, and I served until last year, August 1st. I was bishop. So I carried out 9 full years, but one of those years was a COVID year. So we got that 4th year.
Yeah.
And so the convention is going to be this June, where they'll elect Jeff Miskus, my first vice president, is currently the sitting bishop, and he's up for election against David Peterson, pastor in Fort Wayne, Indiana, at Redeemer. One of
he is running.
David Peterson is running. Both fine men.
Yeah.
Just good friends of mine, and I'll be at the convention for the first time in a long time. I've been up for election for the last 6 conventions, so this will be the first convention that I'm not up for a synodical position. I was nominated to go back to the office of bishop, but this Concordia University System thing, I should probably put some time in before.
Yeah. So tell me about what is your position? What is that? What is your position, and what exactly does it do?
So I am now president of the Concordia University System, and what that is the system, the CUS system, is the conglomeration of currently 5 universities with 6 campuses, and that would be Concordia Irvine in California, Concordia Nebraska in Seward, Concordia St. Paul here in Minnesota, Concordia Chicago in what is River Forest, and then Concordia University Mequon, north of Milwaukee, and they have a second campus in Ann Arbor. And of course, Concordia University, Texas was a part of the system. Currently, if you look on our materials, you won't see them, partly because of what has gone on, and we can certainly get into that. But my job is changed in 2023 at the Synodical Convention. Resolution 704B changed pretty much everything that CUS does. So what we are predominantly responsible for now is ecclesiastical visitation and Lutheran identity. And supporting the presidents and the Board of Regents, the bylaws call for CUS, myself and Douglas Patel, my vice president, to work with the presidents and the boards of regents and the faculty and staff on their Lutheran identity, on their witness to the world, on, being a Concordia. And we work with the district presidents in those. And this is where, being a former district president, these are all men, colleagues of mine that I served with. So I really enjoy, in fact, I schedule my office time when the brothers are meeting in Council of Presidents in St. Louis. And so I can run into those guys when I'm, for lunch and stuff.
Yeah.
We got to dinner and we stay in contact. Many of those guys I'm still very, very close with. The Council of Presidents is a great group of guys. And so CUS is a change for me because as bishop, I had ecclesiastical responsibility for 165 churches and probably 300 and plus church workers. And so now that scope is narrowed, but we have 22,000 plus students in our system. I was a finalist with Chuck Eashan and Eric Ankerberg for the presidency at CUW in Mequon, and the regents chose Eric. And then 8 months later, the CUS position opened up and I became a candidate. And then by God's grace, I was elected and accepted that call in July of last year. And so I'm still, I'm within the first year. So I'm still kind of getting my feet wet, although I served as the Council of Presidents representative to the CUS, to the CUS board.
Okay.
So I have experience on the CUS board, but being president of it is a completely different thing. And so mainly our task in this first year was to do the first round of informal visits, which is basically a 6-person team from the CUS board, basically. And then we've done 2 of the 5 formal visitations. We did Irvine in January and Seward in February.
One of my good friends, Zach Viggers, I think, was on that.
Zach was on the Irvine, and he actually wrote the report. He was secretary.
Okay, yeah.
And you can find that report on cus.edu. It's on the front page. I would encourage anybody to go on to cus.edu. It's a revamped website. Doug has revamped it, and everything about CUS is accessible with very simple clicks. And we've also set it up for a lot of years, pretty much the last 10 or 15 years, kind of donating to CUS has not been a part of anything in terms of supporting it. The Synod supports it fully. And so we have a Give Now button on there that we've received. Really, it's kind of amazing. We've had it up and live about a month and a half or 2 months. And we've received several donations of people who are desirous to support church work, to support faculty development, to support Lutheran identity, or just the CUS in general. And that is a really important thing, because the church must understand that preparation for church work, that is our calling. That is what the Concordia University System was established to do. I'm happy to say, in one respect, we have 802 church workers in the system.
At the Concordia.
Currently, in the 5 universities, we have 802 church workers in the system. That's pre-sem, DCE, teacher ed. Concordia, Nebraska has 275. Concordia, Mequon has 225. So those 2 institutions have 500 of the 802. And ironically, 102 is the number of Concordia in Minneapolis or St. Paul.
Yeah.
So they have 100. It's the largest class that they've had in 10 years. And they're doing fantastic. Brian Friedrichs, the president, is doing a wonderful job getting that going. Russell Dawn out of Chicago has just announced their church work program is a max out of pocket of $5,000 a year.
Okay. So that was the big thing with Concordia St. Paul, right? Is that it's now free? Is that right for church workers?
Let's make sure we are very clear about
Okay.
this. It's a tuition guarantee. Nothing's ever free. I was eating in the cafeteria on our informal visit, and I was talking to some church work students, and they were telling me that they came to St. Paul for the reason of free tuition. And I just said, stop there for a second. And I pointed over to a kid in the line. I said, is that kid in church work? No. He's nursing or something. I said, it's not free because that kid's paying for you.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it is free in terms of the student gets, for their tuition. They still have room and board and whatnot. And we're making strides here. Look, I'm in the middle of trying to create a voucher system where we're going to have $500,000 and we're going to give 1,000 students $5,000 vouchers, which, just by the way, I came up with that number before Russell did his thing. And so in Chicago's case, a church worker with the CUS voucher would have $0 out of pocket. And so I'm working on this. It's not there yet. We're not rolling it out. I'm not announcing that we're doing that, but I've told the presidents, I've mentioned this to some synodical leaders. We're trying to get to the place where because CUS has money for the sake of the church, and we have endowment monies, and we're trying to create, with my financial background, a voucher system where church workers can have an additional. I want the Synod to know that the CUS, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod Board of Directors, by financially supporting CUS, does financially have a stake in preparation of church workers. So, I mean, this is really important for people to understand. There is money flowing. It's not what it used to be when they first started.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not. And it needs to be more. It needs to be better. And we're working on that. But we're going to be writing some pretty big grants here. Douglas Patel, my vice president, is really good at that stuff. And we're going after some big money to start dealing with this. We're also trying to weed through all of the foundation stuff. When I took office, I met with the LCMS Foundation, and to be frank with you, this is not something that many people have looked at. It's my background. I mean, I have 20 plus years experience in large foundation work. I got a doctorate in business administration, finance, and whatnot. And so I'm looking at our investments. I'm looking at our portfolio, what our asset allocation is in a portfolio, because it's been the same for almost 20 years. And what standard portfolio asset allocation was 20 years ago is not what it needs to be today when it comes to things like endowments that are perpetual forever. You see? And so we're making some changes there. I'm partnering with the LCMS Foundation, the good folks there. And so we're making progress, and things are going in the right direction. I mean, we have accomplished a ton of stuff, written all these protocols that are called for in the last 8 months. Douglas Patel has done a great job at that. But I mean, we have protocols on everything. Regent vetting. So we just vetted some regents for Chicago. Mm-hmm. So like the way that the Synod bylaws work is if you're an elected regent from the Synod or the district convention and you either resign or get removed, we have to go through a synodical nominations process. Those names all come to the CUS. We vet them. You have to have 2 of these 12 qualifications. We send those back to John Sias's office. Synod's nominations committee turns a slate back to the CUS board, and then the CUS board elects a member to fill that vacant spot. But when it comes to appointed members of a board, if somebody resigns, they just send us names to vet. We vet them in the same way, give those names back to the board, and then they elect. Okay. And so CUS still has a major role in the regents. We do theological faculty vetting and prior approval. So all this prior approval stuff, you since you're not on Facebook, you probably don't follow this, but there's a lot of to-do right now and criticism about prior approval, both presidential prior approval.
Can you tell me about that? Because I saw updates on YouTube about it. There were some videos that went out, and I haven't watched any of them. So I saw those, and I said, I don't really know what this is about. So maybe you can explain it.
Yeah, no. So there's three different prior approvals. There is university president prior approval, which the panel for that is the president of Synod, the district president of the institution, and the chairman of the board of directors of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Okay. And let me make sure I get that right. The DP, the local DP, for prior approval for the committee. Yes. And so that's the panel. And so at the university president's level, all the names are nominated. Those names go to that panel. That panel meets, and then they give the university regents a slate to elect from. Okay. And in terms of criteria, it's up to those 3 men. I mean, there's no like written list of, there was a big to-do about the Concordia, Wisconsin when I was nominated because President Harrison turned back a list of 12 names, and several people from the regents who wanted names that were nominated of the 42 names didn't get them, and they went nuts about it. So there's a lot of criticism.
So what's caused the controversy in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, well, the controversy is there really is no explanation given as to why someone doesn't qualify. So there's a lot of people out there right now that are squawking, and if you're on the roster in good standing, you should automatically, if you're nominated, be a candidate. Well, there's more to the story. I mean, when it comes to a university president, and by the way, the same thing goes with seminary presidents. There's a 3-person panel, same makeup, that I shared with you. And that panel chooses the slate. But the regents, both at the seminary level and at the university level, have the final say in who they elect from that approved slate. So that's the squawking. You have a group of people that believe their buddy should be a candidate and he's best suited for this.
They think there's some kind of conspiracy.
Yeah, that a lot of people believe that Matt Harrison is just controlling. And I know Matthew very well. He takes this very seriously because CUS, now the prior approval for theological faculty, of which I administer, I don't vote, but I administer it with the 3 men who currently is the Council of President's chairman, Lee Hagan. Okay. Mark Braden, chairman of the CUS board, and Matthew Harrison. That's the panel for prior approval of faculty. And I'm gonna have to go back. Maybe the presidents of the university, I got the makeup wrong. It's the DP, the Synod president, and CUS. Forgive me. These are all there's so many. The processes are all the same, but
either way, the
individuals.
The theme
Matthew's
of the
on
controversy.
All of them. Yeah, Matthew's on all of them. That's one of the controversies.
Okay.
And the local district president, and or in the case of faculty for the Concordias, is the CUS president, and then the COP president of the Council of Presidents. And so for us, we get a faculty member from a university, a name, and we vet them. And there's very stringent qualifications. For instance, an advanced degree. You can't just have a second master's. We have a whole document, by the way. It's public. You can go on cus.edu and see the faculty regent vetting, faculty vetting for theology or the regent. That's all there. Everything's public. And this is what I don't like about these guys that are out there on Facebook and everything else cranking off about this. There's full transparency.
Yeah.
what we look for is clearly outlined in there. So for instance, if you are in a PhD program, that's great. But we want to know what your topic is. We want to know what your projected graduation date is. And if we give you theological prior approval and you become a faculty member, and you stop your PhD, we get to revisit. You don't get to just keep your prior approval. Mm-hmm. These things are all a part of this. And so it comes down to one thing and one thing only. People think it's a popularity contest and it's a Matt Harrison controlled faction contest, but that's simply not true. I have worked with President Harrison in the last 8 months on a number of faculty, and the amount of work that man does in preparation for the meeting, when he comes to the meeting, the comments that he makes in terms of what he has read of the men, they watch YouTube videos of their delivering service. I mean, this is Mark Braden, chairman of the board, English district pastor. Mark is absolutely thorough with his, and Lee Hagan, COP chairman, that brother is constantly talking to the district president from where the guy is coming, getting information, reading Piff and Set. I mean, what I want people to know about the prior approval process, whether it's president of seminary, president of a university, president or a faculty of a theological faculty, this is not just whimsical. It's not just Jamison Hardy's name goes up there and he's buddies with Matt Harrison. He gets to go through. That is not what happens. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's just not what happens. And I think you're going to see it. I've looked at. I'm part of.
Why do you think those accusations are there?
Look, I think ultimately this comes down to two-party system in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. You have a faction. When I say a faction, you have Matt Harrison and the last 12 to 15 years of leadership by Matthew, and you have those who oppose Matthew. And so anything that goes on that they don't like, they make the accusation against Matthew that somehow this is a political, he's controlling everything and, nobody gets a chance that's not in his camp or his buddy. Mm-hmm. And it's just not true. I mean, it's just simply not true. I served for 9 years with him on the Council of Presidents. I'm serving underneath him now as CUS president. He's very clear about his mandate. He said to me, grow church work when it came to my job as CUS president. Mm-hmm. He said, grow church work. He told me, pay attention to Lutheran identity. We want our colleges to be as Lutheran as they can be without being ashamed, leaning into our identity, leaning into our faith, leaning into our belief in the inerrancy of Scripture, using the Book of Concord as our platform to speak about this, as we do in the church, taking a quia subscription to the Book of Concord. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, his mandate to me is nothing short of grow the place. We don't want to shrink it. Mm-hmm. And yet higher education right now is under the gun.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's silly for people who want to criticize our Concordias. We've closed 3 Concordias over the last 5-6 years. Each one of those closures has been different, right? So Concordia Selma, historic black college down in Selma, Alabama. Mm-hmm. Their graduation rate was abysmal. They would bring kids in to play football. They'd come in the fall, then they'd leave. And that messes up the graduation rate. You'd bring these athletes on that all they wanted to do is play football. They weren't the greatest students, so their academic performance was not good, even if they stayed. And they start getting into financial trouble. The Synod, individuals, groups poured thousands and thousands of dollars into Concordia Selma. Mm-hmm. And there was a number of attempts to quote unquote save it. Well, at some point, you can't keep throwing money into a hole, right? So they closed it. Of course, that was a big uproar at the convention. I believe it was in, maybe it was in 16 that convention, I think, it was in 16. And,
what were some of the false narratives that were being pushed at that time? Because you make it sound like it's a pretty simple kind of business.
Thank you. I mean, maybe I was 19, maybe convention was 19,
okay,
where that blew up. Well, I mean, some of the things were that, the Synod was intentionally trying to kill it. There's always this overtone of racism in the church, and it drives me nuts because this had nothing to do with race. This had nothing to do with, historic black college. We had another historic black college in North Carolina, by the way, years ago, that closed, right? Or it was in the state of North Carolina, a Concordia, and there was just politics. I mean, I was on the council when this was going on. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Southern District President, Kurt Schultz, would give reports to the council. At that time, you had 3 entities that could close a university. the regents. You needed 2 of these groups to agree. The regents, the BOD of Synod, or the Council of Presidents. Well, the Council of Presidents was never given the information that we needed to ever make a decision. And when we would ask, I asked for it, and we were told by Synod lawyers, we can't tell you. So the council never was in a position to even vote to close. And so the only 2 bodies that could do that was the Synod Board of Directors and the regents of Selma. And so that's what occurred. So, I mean,
so both of them, they voted to close it down.
Yeah, the process was carried out to close the institution. New York is a whole different story. It's a whole different scenario. New York, the property and some of it was sold to another institution. And by the way,
before it was closed,
or as a part of the closure.
Okay.
And my good friend at the time, he's still my friend, but I mean, Derek Leadcakes was the bishop of the Atlantic District at the time. And I had many conversations with him about the finances. John Nunes was president at the time. And, there was a lot of struggles there operationally. Towards the end there, they ran through a number of different people as chief financial officer. And that's never good when you successively have somebody leading the finances that is a different person, over the course of a year or 2. But they had completely different issues. Their issues weren't necessarily graduation rate. It was low church work attendance, low attendance overall.
So and they just weren't getting enrollment.
It was an overall enrollment. It was there were some operational issues too. But again, that place was sold. Property expensive. They just finally, by the way, it's officially shut down, closed. Everything is done about a month and a half ago or a month ago. I just got notification that that's completely now legally dissolved and done.
Okay.
And then you go out to Portland. And Portland is, of all the 3 institutions, Portland is, in my opinion, probably the biggest disaster. Because the president, Chuck Schlimpert, signed this, I'm sure you've heard of this, the Hot Chalk lawsuit.
No.
Well, Hot Chalk is a company that would do online, get online students and get students for you. And he entered into this agreement with them. And long story short, the numbers, they never got the numbers they needed. And towards the end, and then the financials were getting really, really bad. And Matt Harrison sent in Tom Reese, the former president of Concordia St. Paul, got a background in finance, very smart man. Yeah. And within 1 week, I believe it was 1 week, Tom called Matt and basically said, it can't be fixed. It's that far gone. And then once they closed Portland, of course, Hot Chalk sued, and we're in an active lawsuit right now. CUS has been dismissed, but that's been on appeal. So LCMS, LCEF are still active in the lawsuit. I mean, I'm still involved, but that's an ongoing litigation. But of all the 3 closures,
what's their claim?
Well, they claim that we owe them $300 million because of the contract that was sold. I believe $300 million is the number that they're claiming.
So what was kind of the controversial aspect there?
Well, number one, Chuck Schlimpert, to my knowledge, I've been told by regents who were regents at the time, Chuck and some members of the administration signed this agreement with Hot Chalk, and the regents never knew about it until after it was signed.
This one with like the online.
Yeah. He signed it, and so I think that's one of the gripes.
And that was just a kill shot?
My opinion, again, I was not CUS at the time. This is just my opinion looking from the outside in now, is I think that was kind of the beginning of the end because they were already struggling. CUS had given them some advance and a line of credit and some money that way for operations, but it was all about students. People don't understand about higher education. You have 2 choices. You have federal student loans and federal work study, and you have students who take federal loans, or you have an endowment like Hillsdale or like Harvard or like Yale that you can simply say, we're not going to take any federal money, and the endowment supports operations. None of our Concordias have the kind of money. So let me just give you some financial numbers. One of our institutions, I know very well the finances, one of our institutions gives about $50 million away in student aid. Now, what that means is through their own means,
they're raising $50 million.
Yeah. Either they're getting performance off the endowment, they're getting gifts and bequests, it's
a lot of money on a yearly basis.
Yeah. So you need $1 billion in an endowment with a 5% annual return to get $50 million a year.
They have $1 billion in the endowment?
God, no. Okay. None of our 5 Concordias together doesn't have $1 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, our 5 Concordias together, I think, barely have $500 million. So 500 million. So, I mean, those numbers, I do not have exactly the numbers. Right. I'm just using what I do know about these institutions and kind of averaging. So it might be more than 500 million, but it's not $1 billion between all 5 of them together. And that's another accusation that these internet warriors and these Facebook, firebrands.
You're making me really glad I'm not on.
Well, I mean, at some level, I wish I wasn't either, because these people make these.
Well, someone has to.
Well, yeah, my God,
that's your cross.
problem.
You got to bear.
Well,
you
can bear it too.
Be on
Junior.
social media and come on.
You could bear it too. That's all I know. But the fact of the matter is, they make these grandiose. When Concordia Ann Arbor's problem started about a year ago.
Can we start to lean into Concordia Ann Arbor? Is this a good time? Okay, because I do have a lot of questions.
Once that started, people kept, on Facebook, when I got elected, Matt Harrison elected Jamison Hardy to destroy the whole Concordia University system and make one classical college. And that's reference to my brothers out there in Wyoming.
LCC, yeah.
To make one classical college and get rid of all of it and be a purist and just do church work. And Hardy is Darth Vader and Matthew Harrison is, the Sith Lord. And this has been designated. And Hardy, look, I said this in the interview when I was elected. I said it in my installation. I got railed on Facebook on Concordia Matters for this. But the truth is, there's no better place for evangelism than on our Concordia campuses. Mm-hmm. That's a fact. I mean, you got young people coming from all over the world and all these aspects. And so it started at Concordia Ann Arbor. I mean, all the drama.
Yeah. So what can you just paint for those that don't know, and then kind of get into maybe some of the narratives that are there, and then get to some of the details that kind of can push back against.
So Concordia University Wisconsin Ann Arbor, CUWAA, one university with two campuses. That's how Pat Ferry coined it in 2013.
Which wasn't always the case, right?
No. Ann Arbor was an independent university, but I'm telling you, when the facts are actually looked at, Concordia Ann Arbor was failing before 2013, bankrupt, almost to the point of bankruptcy. Pat Ferry and CUW, my alma mater, I'm a graduate of CUW. Pat Ferry and Al Prock now worked to figure out whether or not CUW could assume the Ann Arbor campus. And so they did. They worked out a deal with Synod, and they took all the assets, all the liabilities, all the debts, everything. The English District, Ohio District, Michigan District, Indiana District, Northern Illinois District, South Wisconsin, the Michigan Church Extension Fund, we all contributed money. CEF of Michigan took a loss on the loans that they had, and they redid everything financially to get Mequon on the road, and so CUWAA was born. Pat Ferry decided that they were going to keep the campuses independent, but they're one university with two separate campus lives. So CUAA had its own athletic programs, and they were NAIA, and CUW is Division III, and they had their own, the Blue Falcon and the Red Cardinal, and you had two separate cultures, but one university.
Two different presidents?
No, Pat was the president, but Pat had assigned campus executives. First, it was Kurt Gilo, wonderful man. It lives in Mequon, former mayor of Mequon. I know him well. I work with him right now on a Concordia Ventures, which is a cap asset. We do venture capitalism to give money to projects and stuff. And he's a phenomenal guy. He had the first couple of years. And then Pat put Ryan Peterson, who now here is working for St. Paul, Concordia St. Paul. Okay. Ryan's a friend of mine. And so for 10 years, Concordia Ann Arbor has been going, and for the last 5 or 6 has been growing. Even hit to the point where the state of Michigan said it was the fastest growing private college in Michigan. And so in February, but all along, let me be very clear, all along, they were losing money. They were losing money all along in the operational side.
Which was that the prime, I mean, obviously they were close to bankruptcy. So that was the prime issue pre-2020 or pre-2013.
Well, the issue,
were their numbers also going down at that time? So both were going down.
So numbers were going down both in enrollment and in finance. It was falling apart in 2013. Mm-hmm. Actually, CUW taking it over gave it 10 more years of prosperousness. Mm-hmm. But Mequon, when they took it over in 2013, was turning about a $10 million black bottom line profit in operations.
Wow.
Last fiscal year, not immediately last, but 2023, they lost $8 million. Last year, they lost, Ann Arbor campus lost $2 million in operations. That's not the full financial picture, because you have endowment performance. And a lot of people, when they hear me say that, they want to go nuts and say, well, the gifts and bequests. And it's true. There are other forms of income. But Dr. Ankerberg, the president, he wants to operate on a neutral basis, because we don't know what the future of higher ed is going to be.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And by the way, this is my position as well. I want to be clear, and this is why I'm part of the evil empire with a lot of people, because as a businessman, I believe we need to do our best to operate as close to net neutral and zero as possible. Mm-hmm. Because when things go bad, like today, the market dropped $2,600. For anybody who's close to retirement, they're freaking out. Well, let me just give you a quick economic lesson. In being a former undergraduate of business, you probably know this. The Dow Jones Industrial Average over the last 30 years have had at least one 10% downward correction. And within 30 to 45 days from that low point, it has rebounded. This is not about market timing. This is just historical data, right? It has rebounded 3 to 5% from the low point in 30 to 45 days. So these people that panic and they sell their assets and in 2008, when the housing crisis hit, if you stayed invested and didn't sell your assets and your portfolio went 50% down, if you'd have stayed in that investment where you had, within about a 6 or 7 month period from the low point, you would have made money.
Yeah, I trade crypto, so I do that every 3 months.
Well, can I borrow a Bitcoin? That's what I want to know.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't have a full Bitcoin, but I know somebody.
Bennett, you got some Bitcoin?
The Stanchfield endowment.
That's right. I got some buddies who do that, and I got a buddy who wanted me to get in at 2,000, and this was the biggest regret of my life. But anyways, don't get me going. I'll start crying. But so Ann Arbor, and so Dr. Ankerberg had a financial analysis done by a firm that does this, and it was gloom and bleak, and so there's a long process that started out. I think a lot of criticism, and rightly so, has been given to the administration and the Board of Regents because of the way they handled it, February of 2024 through about May of 2024 initially. And I'm just going to tell you, and Dr. Ankerberg, if he was sitting here, would say this to you, it could have been done better. That's a fact. But today we are where we're at. And today what they're doing is everything on the main campus is going to be done after this academic year, and they're moving to the North Campus. And when Pat Ferry and Al Prochnow did all the stuff...
So they're downsizing.
They're downsizing, and they're moving the operations to the North Campus. The North Campus is where all the medical stuff is, and this is what Mequon brought to the table. Nursing, beautiful nursing facility up there, PT, OT. They believed that those programs, once they got fully operational and running, would service the debt. They would make enough money. And the claim is, we'll just got to keep waiting it out. You can't just keep throwing money in hopes that you're going to have this tipping point. And there's no evidence that would have been the case. And so, I mean, look, I grew up in Michigan. Concordia Ann Arbor, when I was a child, I'd go there and watch basketball. It was the college of my, of course, I skipped over the pond and wrestled in Concordia, Wisconsin. But the truth of the matter is, from a business standpoint, something had to be done. And I think this is the problem. So, you have this Facebook page, Concordia Matters, where you got about 10 or 15 people that just keep railing every day on something new about.
You get snapshots of this. Oh, so although I don't have social media, I've got people that'll send me snapshots of things.
It's just, in some respects, it's almost exhausting, because these same people say the same things about every topic.
Yeah.
And things like they destroyed the most confessional, fastest growing. So look, the statistics are true. CUAA was one of the fastest growing schools. But what none of these people want to talk about is 70 to 80% of the students that came in to help that growth were athletes. And those athletes cost 25 to 30% more, because the academic students, you don't have all the overhead for coaches and for, uniforms and facilities and stuff. You got a lot of people donate money for fields and stuff. And these are great Christian people. And I don't want the main campus to be sold. Okay. But everybody wants to tell the world it. And I got into a little bit of a debate with one of these tyrants on Concordia Matters. And I told them, I said, you keep telling the world that I want to close this place. I don't want to close this place. I'm on record. I don't want to close Concordia Ann Arbor, but we can't keep operating it the way it is. And so Dr. Ankerberg is doing his best. And believe me, I'm involved in the conversation. Dr. Ankerberg and I talk regularly. He's a good man. He's doing his best. And unfortunately, because of the announcements of what we're going to do, the place it's really struggling. And I hope there's a way for us ultimately long-term on the North Campus to save the place.
So when you say North Campus.
So there's two campuses. You got the main campus on Getty's Road.
Okay.
You got property on both sides of Getty's Road. The Michigan District Office is on Concordia Ann Arbor property. And then about 1.5 miles, 2 miles to the north, the former Cooley Law School for the University of Michigan. We purchased that about 7-8 years ago, and that's the North Campus. It's its own building, parking lot, and the whole 9 yards. And so they're going to move all the operations to the North Campus. Are they
selling the South Campus?
Well, it's possible. Okay. It's not up right this moment, but it's on the docket as a possibility. To my knowledge, there is no written contract for the main property. There is an offer on the football field. I mean, I can say that, but there's no decisions made. There's no.
So if this were to play out, then the idea for Concordia Ann Arbor would be it's going to become a smaller, more specialized school.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, one of the
in
things
the hopes that at that point
it'll resurge. It'll look. They have to bring back church work preparation. I mean, that's a must.
Where's
They're
their
taking
church
a 1 year
preparation numbers compared to other?
Well,
Concordias?
like right now, I think 225 is a part of the Mequon Ann Arbor number, but I think they only had like 20 or 30 church workers total of that 225.
Oh wow!
So yeah, it was not producing the way that the people want to say it was producing. And this is the other thing that these tyrants on Concordia Matters, they don't want to take into consideration. And by the way, the sad reality is one of these people that I'm talking about that are constantly blowing off in Concordia Matters is somebody I went to high school with, somebody who I never had any kind of conflict with them. But they just, and I won't mention their name. I'm not trying to call them out, but I won't say if it's a man or a woman, but they have a child that goes to CUAA. And I understand the emotions of their child's trauma over this. I do. I truly feel bad for these church work students. Some of them are going to have to transfer to Mequon. Some of them are going to try to go to other Concordias. Some of them are not going to go to a Concordia. I mean, so as bishop, I closed 8 churches. It's never a joy. It's never a pleasant thing, but I believe in the Bible. And the Bible says where one door shuts, God opens the door in other places. And I want you to know we have great things going on at our Concordias. Concordia St. Paul. They just opened a nursing campus in Denver, Colorado.
Concordia St. Paul.
St. Paul. Concordia St. Paul has the Portland Nursing School still operational in Portland from Concordia, Portland. We are investigating in the Concordia University System regional campuses in desert oasis in the United States, like the Southeast, like the Northeast, like the East, Central East. We're going to be having a conversation with Roger Pavla of the Mid-South District next Thursday about a regional campus in Tennessee. So the CUS, I mean, I am working with our presidents and our current Concordias because
there's an expansion plan.
Well, there is an expansion plan in the form of some ideas that we're digging into.
Right.
As a written plan, no, we don't have a written plan yet. I mean, I have some concepts of what we do, but let me just give you an example. We have a church in one of our southeastern districts that built an 8-class schoolroom for a Lutheran Church Missouri Synod grade school. They never filled it at all. They never occupied it at all. So they have this beautiful building with 8 beautiful classrooms, bathrooms, offices, the whole thing, and nobody's in it. We can walk in there tomorrow, get some local accreditation, do some teacher ed preparation, maybe some seminary, a nursing school, whatever, with one of our existing Concordias as a branch campus. It's cheaper for the Concordias to do regional campuses than to set up a full university with all the overhead property and all that other stuff.
Do you think there's a movement there anyway in higher ed?
I do. I think, everybody talks about online.
Yeah.
Right? And we have online. All of our universities have online. But as much as online is a component of higher ed, and I think we have to have it at the seminaries, we have to have it at the universities, people still want to be together. I mean, people still want to look at each other. They want to be in the same room. If there's one thing I learned about COVID is we were foolish. We were foolish to believe the myth and the lie that we can't be together. Human nature is we want to be together. And so while I believe we have to offer these things, residential education, both at the seminaries and at our Concordias, is not going to go away. And I don't think it's going to go away in higher ed. Now, what's fueling most of higher ed today in the bigger schools, obviously, is athletics and the NIL deals and the big money. I mean, I got 1 year left at college eligibility. Maybe I need to go back and wrestle again. You think they'd give me a nice contract?
Bennett was wondering if who would win in a wrestling match between me and you.
Listen, I shackled that beast, Bennett. I won't. I'm in the Hall of Fame at Concordia, Wisconsin for wrestling, just so you know. Yeah. You're in the presence of a Hall of Famer. I didn't say that, but you can draw your own conclusion. I can tell you, though, as a former wrestler, the one thing I can promise you is the only sport in the Bible that is actually accurately reflected. Jacob wrestled with the Lord. And you read that text. You go home tonight, Ben, and you read that text. And it said that the wrestler, Jacob, would not let go of the Lord. He had such a grip on the Lord. And so Yahweh of Sabaoth touched the hip in the socket, and that's what the wrestler let go. This is what I want people to know about wrestlers. By divine right, we're pretty tough dudes.
Yeah. Best sport. I will.
My God, it's the best sport. Yeah. One-on-one. And you wonder why I like Thunderdome.
And it hurts.
Now you know.
And it hurts. And it should hurt. If it's worthwhile, it should hurt.
You believe that, my friend. And, you got less. I mean, my oldest son, Noah, is a Division I wrestling coach at California Baptist University. And he had some kids. We went to the national finals. I was there this year, by the way, when Wyatt Hendrickson from Oklahoma State beat Gable Steveson from Minnesota. And it was the most exciting thing I have ever been involved with in my life. That stadium, it blew up. Not to mention our president, Donald J. Trump, was there. And old Wyatt pointed him in the corner, saluted the commander-in-chief, and draped himself. It was unbelible.
That's one of my dreams is to go to the... I didn't watch it this year. I normally watch. This year I just didn't. I don't know why.
Well, you want to go next year? I might even get a booth. We'll put a bunch of... I got a bunch of guys in Missouri Synod.
Yeah.
Well, if nothing else, my son will get some tickets. This is going to be my annual trek.
Yeah.
I wrestled twice in the national final tournament, NAI for Mequon. So my son, as a father, looking down there and seeing my son coaching, or being down on the main floor, it was amazing.
Oh yeah.
He gave me a pass, and we went down there. I got to walk around and see all the modern warriors. But these wrestlers are the last real warriors. And Jacob wrestled with the Lord, and we all wrestle with Satan. When I come home from seminary when I was younger, my pastor, he'd always say, "Jim, stand up. God made Jim that way to wrestle the damn devil," he'd say. I said, "Ralph, you don't got to tell." I mean, that's like the 30th time you've told the church that I'm this big to wrestle the devil. So, but so that's been my
I did watch last year, Penn State, right?
I don't want to talk about Penn State. I spent 20 years in Pennsylvania. Well, I spent 20 years in Pennsylvania. And the problem with Penn State is they're good.
They are good.
I mean, they've won like 8 of the last 10, like 12 of the last.
Last year was the most points scored.
This year they beat that.
Did they really?
They beat it this year.
Wow.
But watch out for Oklahoma State, because that David Taylor, former Penn State, that David Taylor.
There's a local, who's the, can you look up Bennett, maybe just Gables? I can't remember his name.
Gable Steveson? He's a heavyweight.
Is he a freshman?
No, he's a heavyweight. No, the kid from Minnesota who's a freshman?
He's from here. He's from Waconia.
Yeah,
I watched him wrestle here at the high school.
That kid is a
He's
stud.
Good.
That kid's going to be a national champion.
He lost to the Penn State guy in the Big Ten championship. But he is.
He is a stud.
And I didn't catch any good.
He's an All-American.
Yeah.
He's a stud.
He would just tech fall kids whenever I saw him here, because he was just, it wasn't even fair. He was wrestling
Minnesota they got a good program. You got it. That's it.
Him.
Bennett McAnally. This kid is going to be a national champion maybe next year.
Yep.
He's that good. But, look, I'm a big Iowa fan. They just signed a Pennsylvania kid, Bo Bassett. They just gave him $5 million. My God, that's why I need to go back to college, man. $5 million. I mean, this kid is a junior in high school, and he's getting $5 million. Now, he's good. I wasn't half bad. I'll take a $500,000. That's my God. So
give it to the endowment fund.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I do believe with our Concordias that we've got to pay attention to these financials. We got to grow our endowments. We got to get to the point where we can tell the federal government to go fly a kite. Excuse me. I mean, on these student loans. Because while we have a reprieve under, President Trump in terms of the accosting of faithful Christians, it's going to come back. I mean, it doesn't matter who the president is, and it doesn't matter necessarily Republican or Democrat. Right now, the Republican Party and Donald Trump is very supportive of religious liberty and the church and whatnot. That doesn't mean the Republicans will forever. And that's another grind on Facebook. This accusation that that Lutherans who are Republicans are, neo-Nazis and all this other crazy stuff. Donald Trump is the best president in my lifetime defending the sanctity of life. He's the only president that came to the national breakfast for the right to life. As sinful of a human person as he is, as crazy as sometimes the things he says, there has been no better president to defend a religious liberty than Donald J. Trump. I mean, in my lifetime, in 51 years. And so, that's not the Republican Party, because it's today. Look, my dad was a diehard conservative Democrat because he worked for the trains, Amtrak train. It was subsidized. My dad was a pro-life Democrat back in the 80s and the 90s, and he was the most conservative theologian you'd ever want to meet. He was a working man, and that was the Democratic Party. Well, look what's happened in this election. Trump picked up a lot of those working men. You know what I mean? And conservative working men and women, and people that are of faith. Now, you get a lot of people, who hate him too for a lot of different reasons. But I just say this for the sake of the church and for education. Look, he's trying to destroy He's trying to get rid of the education department and send it back to the states. Look, I was on the public school board in Pennsylvania at Peters Township for eight years, and I can tell you that the federal government in poor neighborhoods and poor performing neighborhoods can have a huge negative influence on education. And even in the colleges, look, we have to abide by Title IX. We have to abide by all these federal things. Now we have the ability to lean back on our religious position to defend us and say, we're not going to do this. We're not going to promote homosexuality. We're not going to promote this. But we still are. The Concordia University System is still in a quandary. And one day I think is either going to have to face the music and walk away from federal funding, depending on who the president and the government is, or, what's the alternative? Mm-hmm. There is no alternative. We either walk away from the funding and do it ourselves, or we take the funding and follow the rules that they force us to follow, which would, in many cases, go against our faith, which, as long as I'm a part of this, is not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And I can promise you that.
Let me ask you some macro questions, kind of building off that, but going back to, some of the discussion that takes place around Concordia Ann Arbor and everything like that. So, some of it draws back into the macro question, because you're saying Concordia Ann Arbor, a lot of students, athletes, there's the financial aspect here, but you're also saying there's something like 20-ish, right?
Yeah,
church workers, and not to quote you on that number.
Yeah, I don't know I don't remember the exact number of the campus.
Yeah, let's even say it's 40 or something like that. So what's the point of the Concordias? One, and then second, like, what is Lutheran higher education? Like, how do we have to define those two things?
Yeah.
And then use that as a kind of a litmus and a lens to then look at what our institutions are doing.
Let's go back to the original purpose of the Concordias. Mm-hmm. The original purpose of the Concordias was to prepare church workers. That's it. In the 80s and late 80s and early 90s, what started to happen is you started to get the financial pressures, mm-hmm. right? Higher ed has morphed many times over the years, but money is at the centerpiece. Mm-hmm. When I was in college, tuition was about $12,000 in 1992 to 96. Today, it's like $40,000, right? Mm-hmm. Published tuition. That's not what anybody actually pays.
Right.
But, the fact of the matter is they started things like nursing and other disciplines to bring in more students and more revenue to do this. Here's a business concept, is scaling, right? Yep. You have more at lesser value, but the more you have at lesser value, the more you can bring in. Mm-hmm. So if you have 10 units at $100, it's the same $1,000 if you had 1,000 units at $1, mm-hmm. right? That's the same amount of money. Mm-hmm. And so the truth is you can spread the costs. So look, there's fixed costs in university education. You have professors, you have property, you have utilities, you have buildings, you have all this stuff. So those fixed costs are what they are.
And if you have 10 students, that's a big dollar amount.
So
if
the
it's
more
1,000 students,
it's
less.
If you have the more students you have, your cost will go up with more students because you need more faculty and staff to support mm-hmm. those students. But let's just say your average cost is going to be set at X number of dollars. Mm-hmm. And you need, we'll just use round numbers. You need $1,000 to pay your fixed cost. If you have 10 students, that's $100 per student. If you have 100 students, that's $10 per student. Mm-hmm. You see the difference? Mm-hmm. And so the theory was you add these other programs, and this is one of the ways. There's like three or four mainline funding ways to do higher education. One of those funding ways is the numeric way. The more students and all this stuff.
You just kind of grow.
Yeah. One way is the endowment side, like the Hillsdale model,
yeah.
Or the Harvard model, where you have, in Harvard's case, I think they got $1 trillion, or I don't know the number. Maybe it's 100.
I've heard it's absolutely ridiculous.
$100 billion, mm-hmm. and so that money can do whatever they want. They can do whatever they want, and they don't need to take federal money. They still do, by the way. In a lot of cases, these big universities still take federal money, which is one of the reasons why a lot of people want to change the rules so those big universities that have billions and billions and trillions of dollars in endowments can't take federal money because they have all the money they need. Mm-hmm. But that's a different topic. But in the Concordias, so back in the 80s and 90s, they start adding these programs. And once they start adding these programs, it becomes a building block. And so before you know it, you start out as church work preparation, teacher education, DCE, pre-seminary, and now you have nursing, biology, mm-hmm. go down the list. And so we're at a point now where the diversification of the offerings is really important. But our center of the plate, our purpose as a Concordia University System university is church work preparation.
Because that's the primary service to the church.
That's
it's not
right.
the only service to
No,
the
it's
church.
not the only.
Yeah.
Because all these people that graduate in all these other disciplines, they serve the church.
Mm-hmm.
They serve their local congregation. They serve, whatever denomination they are. They serve in a vocation that God has given to them.
Mm-hmm.
So me, president of the Concordia University System, I am not at all opposed to adding programs. I mean, one of our universities is looking at adding an M.Div. We don't have any M.Div. Portland had a law school. We need a law school. We need to have some more Lutheran lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, we do.
We do. I mean, we pay lawyers I have lawyers.
We got a great one at the church, by the way.
Well, I had a great one at the church. I have a great one at my church too. And the gratis stuff that brother does for me is wonderful when I need advice and help. The problem is when you become a corporation like the CUS, it's not gratis anymore, right? And so you need Lutheran people to get paid, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have a lawyer that is a part of this whole. I'm made aware of some of the people that are suing, CUS and whatnot. The guy makes like $1,500 an hour. We need Lutherans making $1,500 an hour. I mean, hell, the Bible says a man is worth his wage.
Yeah.
I don't want to argue about what I might be worth, but I mean, if a lawyer can get $1,500, you're at least $250. Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, I want to be honest. What do you think, Bennett? Is he worth $250? Maybe $300? Give or take. I mean, come on.
Please support the Lutheran Institute of Theology.
Yeah, exactly. So you see, that's the
But
point.
you and I aren't given to the endowment. I mean, it's not that we won't give, but like the endowment fund for the Concordia is not going to blow up because Hardy and Stecker decided to get together.
No.
So you need,
I mean, we're giving. People are
Yeah.
giving. I tithe part of my personal tithe to the CUS. I mean, but I did that. I do that to my parish. I do that. So it's not going to blow up that way.
Yeah.
And we're not looking to blow it up that way. But
Right.
the universities are focusing on growing their endowments. I won't mention which one, but one of our universities is in the middle of a capital campaign right now. And the sole purpose is to grow the endowment, which has the residual effect of more money for church work scholarships, right? I mean, that's so.
So they're expanding to have these different degrees that you can get at the Concordia, and they're doing that, and
By the way, anybody who would criticize that and say that that's not the main purpose, the system has morphed. Our main purpose is church work preparation. Okay, anybody who tells you that it's not, they're not telling you the truth. That is our purpose, but the rest of this is also what we do now. Again, it might not have been the original purpose, but it's what we do now. We do all these other vocations, and it's a part of the lifeblood of our universities. All of our universities have different vocations and different trainings. And I just want to tell you, I've told the presidents that by 2026 or the fall of 2027, I want 1,000 church workers. That's a 25% increase. That's a big ask. People say to me, well, how are you going to do it? Well, I'll tell you a couple of ways how we're going to do it. Number one, CUS just entered into an agreement with KFUO to be the sponsor of Coffee Hour, which is their noontime daily program. Number two, we are the chief sponsor for Higher Things Conference this summer with all the Concordia universities. So we're going to get, there's a laundry list of things that we get for being the chief sponsor of the Higher Things Conference. We're going to be in front of 2,000 to 2,500 students this summer. I'll be at these conferences. Larry Rast, board member at CUS, is going to be at one of them in my place. And then finally, we will be at the LCMS National Youth Gathering, and we're going to be getting a short stage time. We'll bring the presidents up, and I got a little story about my first experience in New Orleans, Louisiana, when I was a senior in 1992. So we are actively going after our youth in the church. I'm making it a priority. We're traveling all over this country, all over the place. We're trying to re-engage in our high schools, our Lutheran high schools. This is low-hanging fruit that, people will tell you. But look, the average student today only goes no more than 300 miles away from home to go to school, to go to college. My own son, my middle son, I have 3 children. My middle son is going to graduate in 2 weeks from diesel mechanic school. He started out at Mac 1, but he wants to fix diesel trucks. Well, I'm glad because he can fix my truck. But the point is, I want our Concordias to get into vocational education as well as another element. See, I mean, you start getting me on this and, it seems overwhelming because people will say, you got all these great ideas. No, it's more than just a great idea. There's a lot of talk about adding vocational training to our Concordia portfolio, whether it's in the actual universities in partnerships with current vocational schools. I look at it this way. Why can't we be the leader in training mechanics, plumbers, electricians, giving them a Concordia Lutheran experience in chapel and allowing them to have a vocational training. My son goes to Indianapolis. He stays with one of my good friends, Marcus McKay, pastor at Advent Lutheran in Zionsville, and he's going to be finishing. He's been doing it for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't we do that? Why can't the Concordia University System get into vocational training with we have the administration. All the universities have the administration. All the universities have the platform. It's just a matter of either putting forth some money to get it going or get a partnership with a local VOTEC school. But we should be hammering this. 60% of students don't go to college anymore.
Well, that's growing. Vocational.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. And the truth of the matter is, this is where Charlie Kirk comes into the play.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's got this big thing he talks about. Everybody goes on the college campus and he says college is a scam. If you really listen to him, he doesn't mean that it's a scam. We need people to get nursing degrees and to get psychology degrees. That's not the point. But when 60% of the students who graduate with a degree go out and don't get a job in the field that they are trained in at college, that's the scam that Charlie Kirk is talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to take advantage of this. The business guy in me says we can capitalize financially on doing two things: giving Lutheran witness to vocational students and growing our portfolio of offerings at our Concordia universities.
Mm-hmm.
And the presidents have already heard me say this. This was day one I started jumping on this. Bernard Bull, my college classmate from Wisconsin, who's president in Nebraska.
Right?
Yeah. Him and I have talked about this. He's a big supporter of the vocational side of this. And we got these kind of ideas. And so, look, one of the things I'm bringing to CUS is just a fresh look at the historic thing that we've done. I am very clear. Our center of the plate is church work preparation, and I will bust my can. I will give everything I can to grow our church work preparation, our pre-sem students. But there's another thing about that, okay? Right now, our two seminaries, I love them both, graduate of Fort Wayne Seminary, Tom Edgar over there at St. Louis is doing a great job.
Mm-hmm.
Bruss, I love that brother at Fort Wayne.
Yeah.
I've talked to Dr. Bruss about this. I haven't had a chance to talk to Dr. Edgar about this, but we've got to do something in our system to incentivize men who go to Concordia universities, that going to a Concordia for pre-sem matters. Now, what can we do, right? There's a number of things that can be done. The Higher Learning Commission has just authorized a 90-credit bachelor's degree, which really effectively would be a 3-year program.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we have our men that want to do pre-sem get a bachelor's from one of our Concordias with this 90-degree bachelor's, and that way they're a year less before, because they're going to get all their theology, all their languages and stuff at the seminaries. Or do we figure out a way to shorten their seminary experience if they go to a Concordia because they got 4 years of, you see what I mean?
Mm.
And I don't have the answers. I don't want anybody who hears me say that.
But the acknowledgement that sometimes you have to pivot and you have to think outside
Absolutely.
the box. Yeah.
Absolutely. I am 100% supportive of residential education.
Mm.
I don't want to, I think my 4 years with my vicarage year and my 3 years at Fort Wayne were some of the best years of my life preparation wise.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the greatest influences in my theological career, David Scare, Art Just, Larry Rast, Dan Gard, they came from my years at the seminary.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a residential guy through and through. Do I think there's a place for SMP? I think we've done a good job at making it better. When it first came out, I was diametrically opposed to it. I'm thrilled that we got rid of lay deacons because it was being abused by district presidents. I actually don't blame, and I was a part of this because this happened when I was on the council of presidents.
Mm-hmm.
I don't blame the laymen who were made deacons and allowed to do word and sacrament with zero training by district presidents.
Mm.
I blame the district presidents who took a shortcut to fill pulpits, right? And you talk about, when you talk about the number of pastors available and the number of congregations and all this stuff, you know, you really need to dig into the actual statistics back in the 80s and the 90s, right? The actual number of available pastors to serve. You'll find out is not, there's not huge differences that people say. There's currently huge differences between the number of graduates, say 30 or 40 years ago, that are coming out of the seminary to the number of graduates that are coming out now. That's a problem. And so that's a lopsided. But if you look, I just read the Michigan District's workbook for their convention, and they publish all their pastors. They got like 50 SMP pastors. The problem with the SMP program is SMP pastors cannot be voting delegates to district or synod. They can't be elected officials, vice presidents, circuit visitors. They can't be synod presidents. They can't, okay. And as we grow that, the bylaws say that guys like you and me,
Mm-hmm.
regular pastors, and I'm not trying to be mean or rude to SMPs,
Mm-hmm.
but guys that went through the system have to supervise. Those guys are always under supervision. So as that SMP number grows and the number of eligible full-time pastors decreases, you're going to get to a tipping point at which you're not going to have enough guys to supervise the SMPs. And then by nature, we're going to have to change the rules to accommodate the situation. You see what I mean?
Which could be a floodgates of
No,
big
this is the
issues.
problem. That's why this Seminex 2.0 with the new online seminary with Chloe, Herman, Dave Meyer, and Ben Hopt is a problem. Because now, to their credit, at least Jeff Chloe's credit, full disclosure, my family line is Chloe. Jeff, we're related.
Okay.
Grandma Chloe, my grandma Chloe,
Mm-hmm.
is relative of, I think, his father or his grandfather. But Jeff is at least clear enough to say that you complete that online M.Div with them, you can't get certified in the Missouri Synod. Jeff knows that, and he's very clear about it.
Does he think that's always going to be the case?
No, I think this is the problem.
Yeah.
And I have to be very careful here because, I mean, you get me started on that one, and we could be in trouble. I could be in trouble because I think this is preparation for a synodical split, to be very honest with you.
Mm.
The secession of Concordia, Texas,
Mm-hmm.
this, it's ever since Matthew Harrison won the election, there's been this movement to restore this, this missional attitude in the church. There is no competition between missional and confessional. They're one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
If you want the message of the gospel to go out in its proper form, you're missional.
Mm-hmm.
You're also confessional.
Yeah.
It's not a competition. But yeah, I got to probably be a little bit careful here because as bishop, we planted 2 churches in Texas. The English district is in Texas now. And if I'd have stayed, we'd have had plenty more.
Yeah.
Well, because look, the bottom line is Texas, I got into it with my colleague, Mike Newman, about this.
Okay, good.
Well, look, the Concordia, Texas secession, that's what it was.
Yeah.
An illegal secession. They voted to violate the bylaws, and Mike Newman was the district president on the Board of Regents. And when they went into executive session, we talked about this in the Council of Presidents, and I asked him, how did you vote? Did you vote in favor of the secession in November 20? He said, I can't tell you because it was an executive session. And in front of the whole council, I told him, I'm not asking you what happened in the session. I'm asking you, how did you vote? The Bible says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. What say you? I asked him. He refused to answer. But the truth of the matter is...
Has it ever come out how he voted?
Not yet, but it will come out because the lawsuit's going to require all those John Does to say how they voted.
Mm-hmm.
And when and if that occurs, he'll be under oath to have to say how he voted.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not making accusations here, but if it comes out that he voted in favor in November of 2022, I think that's a massive problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's a direct violation of his ordination vows to uphold synod,
Mm-hmm.
to uphold as district president and promote the synod. It violates his ordination vows. And so I hope he didn't vote in favor of it. To this day, I don't know. I've asked him and he hasn't told me. I pray God he didn't vote in favor of the secession.
Can you explain the let's pause for a quick moment, and then I want to ask about this Concordia, Texas.
Yeah.
All right, and Bennett says we're back. All right, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, look, when I first came on the Council of Presidents, it was really an interesting time. It was 2015. I was, the youngest ever elected in the English district, 40 and a half years old. And we did this icebreaker at the council meeting down in the Synod headquarters. And at the time, it was the primary for the president's election when Trump was elected in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And as a part of the icebreaker, they had the room divided. Dean Natesty, former district president of Minnesota South,
Mm-hmm.
was leading this icebreaker, and they had names on the wall, Ben Carson, the DeSantis, and all. And one part of the room was Donald Trump. And they said, go to the person in the room that you think is going to win the presidency. And I went to Donald Trump's corner, and I was the only member of the Council of Presidents in 2015, and I stood by myself. They made fun of me. They told me that I was nuts. And then in 2016, when he was elected, they told me I was a prophet.
Yeah.
So take that. You got to stand on your convictions, Bennett. You can't be such afraid that somebody is gonna criticize you. And I'm telling you, it was lonely. I felt like I was naked in that room because, I'm by myself and there, 20 guys are at Ben Carson and here's Hardy at Trump. And history is the best thing in life because I can tell you I was the only one who did that. And I defended it doesn't matter how crazy he is. It doesn't matter the bombacity. The fact is, the question was, who's going to win the presidential election? And I called it. I called it.
You are the prophet of the LCMS.
Well, let me tell you something. And on that one, I was. And those brothers, and ironically, some of my friends on the council to this day still remember. Lee Hagan, the current chairman of the council, he reminded me the other day about that story.
Yeah.
When I was by myself, and I said, "You didn't come to rescue me. You let me hang out there as a lonely duck on the pond."
Well, it's probably something that you were one of the younger ones too.
Well, I was the youngest.
You
on
have
the
to be.
council.
You have to be below a certain age to understand. Trump. Like Gen X kind of understands Trump. Millennials understand. It doesn't mean you like Trump.
Well,
it means you have like a certain level of understanding.
That's true, but as we were talking,
he doesn't speak in the normal ways of like if you're 65, like no one spoke that way, so it makes no sense.
But as I said to you, I have a little history in professional wrestling, and I was telling you before that Jesse the Body Ventura, who was a WWE superstar, WWF back then, and became the governor of Minnesota. Look, one of the reasons he became the governor of Minnesota is he knew how to speak in front of the camera. He had done it his whole career in WWF. And he knew how to talk to the common working man.
Yep.
Another one of my favorite WWE superstars, he's with the Lord now, Dusty Rhodes. He's another one. The common man. That was his song, He's just the common man, I mean, when you learn how to talk to the people who you're hoping that will support you. Now, the vast majority of people that support Donald Trump, they say, they're not educated or whatever. That's not true. I mean, there's a lot of people who are very smart that, you don't have to, when it comes to politics, even in the church, you don't have to necessarily agree with everything that a person says or does in order for you to know that they're the right person for the job. I mean, I was elected district president. I only won by 4 votes on my first election. People were afraid of me in the sense of he's going to destroy the church. The second election, one guy ran against me and I won. The last election before I just resigned, no one ran against me. And that speaks volumes, I think, just of how the people see you. My first election, they were terrified I was going to destroy the church. My last election, I had unanimous support.
Why did they think you were going to destroy the church?
Well, I mean, look, I'm a pretty energetic, loud guy.
You were a professional wrestler.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not afraid to mix it up.
To clarify, you're not talking about your college career as a wrestler. You're saying you were a professional.
No. I gave up my 4th year of eligibility to actually do professional wrestling. I was in a battle royal. I did that circuit stuff in North Wisconsin. So, no, I mean, I think, a lot of people, I was a known quantity because I was an elected vice president. I was a known quantity in the district, but I was also a loud quantity. And I'm a young quantity. And, when I came on the Council of Presidents, my teacher from Fort Wayne Seminary, Bob Newton, former district president of California, Nevada, Hawaii district, we have assigned seats, but they're not really assigned. And he leans over to me and he said, Hardy, he goes, keep your mouth shut and just watch the show. And I looked at him and I said, I don't ever keep my mouth shut, and I normally am the show. Well, that first meeting in 2015, September of 2015, within an hour of me being on the council, I was in the middle of it. And I leaned over to him. I said, I'm not keeping my mouth shut, and I'm going to be a part of the show. So, back in the day, pre-2015, you didn't open your mouth in the council if you're a first-year guy. You had to pay your dues and 20 years in the church and all this other stuff. But that's not my style. I don't think I have to. I'm just equal to the rest of those guys. We're all members of the council. I shouldn't have to wait 20 years to be a participant. You know, that's a whole nother show, I think. But I mean, but the truth is that they're good men. I love my brothers. I really miss being on the council. I miss being on the council. But when I took this call to CUS, I really felt that God was asking me to use the gifts that He gave me for the sake of the church in this specific area. Yeah. And I had to give up something I love dearly, and we were having success as the English district. I was having success as the bishop, and again, it was the highlight of my career. And I'm, at some point, if God wants me to go back, I'll be willing to consider that. But right now, my eyes are focused and trained on growing the Concordia University System.
It's got to be nice to be able to just kind of zoom in on something too. Right?
It is.
Like it's nice to just kind of bite into something and say, I'm going to learn everything I can about this. I'm going to think through ideas, brainstorm. Right. I've got a small group of people.
I got look, Paul Philp was, he's the, formerly worked with Dean Wenthy in CUS, and now he's the head of QNet, Commission Colloquy, where people take the courses and become colloquized in for teacher education. Paul's a wealth of knowledge. He's got 10 years, in CUS. And then Douglas Spitell, he was parish pastor at First Trinity in Oakland, Pennsylvania, English district, one of my vice presidents. And I brought him on as vice president of the Concordia University System, and he is just an absolute workhorse. We got a great team. We got a great board in CUS, very supportive. We got 5 great presidents of our institutions, and we're humming. I mean, Concordia University System. Matt Harrison I've been at a lot of the conventions that have gone on so far, and Matt Harrison has done a phenomenal job at talking about the system, talking about Ann Arbor, talking about Texas, talking about Portland. But he's made the comment in more than one area is that he said more has been done in 8 months in CUS than probably in the last 10 or 15 years, just because the change of 704B has occurred, and we've had all this stuff that we've had to get done in a very short amount of time in order to comply with the bylaws.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the way
it forced adaptation.
Oh God, yes. I mean, I had a written plan of about 20 things I wanted to get to in the first year. We've gotten to about 3 of them because the rest of the stuff had to get done. Now we're starting to get to them. We have this new newsletter called the Concordia Advantage. That's our bi-weekly newsletter. You can get that on cus.edu. I would recommend people sign up for it. We're re-engaging people that used to be CUS supporters and used to be supporters of our colleges that, for whatever reason, we just kind of fell off. But we're trying to re-engage all those people because the church. This is the future. I mean, Concordia University System, our church work preparation is the future. I'm tired of people complaining about the state of affairs in our church. We're trying to do something about it, and so either get on board and help us, or shut up. And when I mean shut up, I mean shut up. You have no right to criticize when you're not willing to be a part of the solution.
Yeah.
We are trying our best, and that goes for Concordia, Wisconsin, Ann Arbor. That goes for St. Paul. That goes for Chicago, Nebraska, and Irvine. These guys, these presidents are doing a phenomenal job at trying their best to meet the needs of the church. And I think they're having great success. I mean, Irvine is hitting on all cylinders. St. Paul here with Brian Friedrichs is hitting on all cylinders in different ways. Bernard Bull in Nebraska, how can you argue with the 275 of 802 church workers at one institution? I mean, they are the church work school for sure right now. Russell Dawn is really turned the corner and done some great stuff. And let me just be clear about saying that. Dan Gard had to do a lot of cleanup theologically and whatnot. And I thank God for Dr. Gard. He was my teacher at Fort Wayne. And then Russell came in, has done a great job at moving them even further. And Eric Ankerberg at Mequon is really doing his best to try and shore that ship up. Michael Thomas out in Concordia Irvine is he's a fire plug. That brother's they're hitting on all cylinders right now in a lot of different ways. They're building an expansion to the chapel. They got a bunch of building things. They bought this Spectrum campus, which is where they do their healthcare and all that stuff. And the Pacific Southwest District office is there. Beautiful, beautiful area. Very high rent district, but they're doing a great job out there. I mean, so anybody who wants to criticize what we're doing, I would rather you lend a hand, participate in making it better. Don't just make the criticisms of, well, prior approval is a secret society, or we're trying to make everybody a classical college. Again, not true. There's a place for Luther Classical College. There's a place for them. There's a means by which they can become a part of the Concordia University System. I went out there. I met with the guys. They've sent a formal letter requesting CUS to do an informal visit in the fall, and potentially they'll make application to become a school. There's no guarantees. I'm the parliamentarian of the Wyoming District Convention, May 1, 2, and 3 of this year. So I'm going to be out there with the boys.
It's a great group out there.
It is.
We love going out to Casper.
Look, I was just out there about 6 weeks
Preuss.
ago. We met with them. I met with their board of regents recently. Christian Preuss, the chairman of the board, Dr. Preuss, a good man. John Hill, the district president, a colleague. We came on the council together. Fantastic theologian, good man. I'm working with Dr. Ristow and his faculty and staff there. So they're not a school of the church right now. There's no means for them to become a school of the church other than going through the CUS system. I've worked through with them what that looks like, and we'll see what the future holds. I can't make any promises. They can't make any promises, but I think they have a place, meaning they have a place in the kingdom of God. And we have some of our current universities who have a classical ed tract. Chicago and Nebraska kind of have some areas where they're pushing this. So We recognize that classical ed is an area that we need to expand. We have a lot of parishes that are offering classical education as a part of their school system. My own church where I serve, Our Savior in Heartland, Michigan, is moving that way. So there's a lot of opportunities there, and I think the more we do together and the less we fight together, the more the gospel is proclaimed. I mean, it seems simple to do, but as a bishop, I can tell you, I go into congregations of people that love the Lord and just fight like cats and dogs.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why. You can disagree with somebody and still be best friends with them. I mean, you can. And I think in the church, one of our biggest problems is we've not gotten the ability to work with people sometimes that we disagree with. And in bigger parishes, what ends up happening is people can amalgamate into smaller groups and never have to interact with other people they disagree with because they have their smaller group that they can always have the family church support, right? And I'm not criticizing that. I think it's great. I wish we had more of that. But the smaller churches like I had in Pittsburgh, 120 on a Sunday, you can't do that. So if you have disagreement with somebody, you either live with them or you hit the road. I mean, that's the alternative. And we were blessed. I was blessed as pastor that we grew and we worked together, but we didn't always agree. I mean, one of my best pastoral stories was about one of my laymen. I buried him, Ralph Hauser, one of the most learned laymen I've ever had in my life. This guy would raise the holy hell at a voters meeting higher than anything that you have ever heard.
Yeah.
And yet when he voted and he lost, within 5 seconds of the voters meeting, okay, let's go to work. Meaning he fought for not doing it. But the body of Christ said we're going to do it, and I'm a part of this body, we're going to do it.
And that's the way to do it.
And he did it. He was the churchman. I love that man. I miss that man to this day, but he was a pain in my right butt cheek on certain topics, right? Because he would let me know. I made a joke. You're a Fort Wayne grad. You had Dr. Scare. Dr. Scare used to, sarcastically say Peter was the first pope, in this whole shock and awe of the papacy. And so in Bible class one day, I just said Peter was the first pope as a sarcastic thing. Well, he had a meeting with me on Thursday. He had a 5-page diatribe how we don't believe in that. And I let him go for an hour and a half. And when he got done, I said, I was just joking. And he looked at me and said, you could have told me that like 5 days ago before I spent all this time. I said, you didn't ask me. You asked for a meeting. I gave you the meeting. You and your wife came in here and screamed at me about Peter's not the first pope. And I was just joking.
Yeah.
I don't believe he was the first pope. Okay. So you see, but I love that man. He taught me so much. He was one of the greatest teachers of me. A lot of my book, a lot of the lay stuff in my book is about Ralph.
Yeah.
So, learning to love those who, and by the way, Lutherans have a lot of unlovable people. I mean, what are your pains in the
or a lot of Germans?
Yeah, pains.
I'm German, and yeah,
me too. I can say that. I'm German, so I can say how horrible they are. I mean, you know what I mean. It's just that attitude, especially in the Lutheran Church, that somehow German Lutheran descendants have some kind of a stake. We don't. This is the thing. We don't have the corner market on the church, but we act like we do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Lutherans act like they do. So.
Well, I do want to get into your book, but I want to do Concordia, Texas first.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's circle back there.
Well, that's a whole nother one, though.
So paint the picture of what's going on there. What kind of narratives have been pushed that are not accurate? Kind of what is the nitty gritty of what's going on there?
Well, I want to acknowledge one thing up front. First of all, it's an open litigation with the Synod. Okay. CUS is not a part of the lawsuit. And the lawsuit is about Concordia, Texas, illegally changing their articles of incorporation and seceding from the authority of the church, thus basically stealing the property. I mean, that's what it amounts to. Okay. So, what's at the core of this? I think a number of unfortunate events occurred that got us to the point we are at. One of those unfortunate events is Don Christian, the former president of CTX, got a communication from my predecessor, Dean Wenthe, and Gerhard Mundinger, the chairman of the board of directors. And I think he felt threatened that CTX was going to be amalgamated into one of the other Concordias. This is what I've heard. Don has never... I've had conversations with Don about this stuff, but we've never gone deep into this. But I do know that he kind of felt threatened, and this was a buildup with 704, what became 704B in 2023. I was the chairman of the subcommittee on 704B, so I helped write the entire 704B that came out of the convention. I chaired that committee. And Don had a lot of concerns about, there was a 3-year process from 2019 to 4-year, 2019 to 2023. And Don was upset about some of the things that we were trying to change. Some of the ecclesiastical, the LEMOs, Lutheran Identity and Mission Outcome Standards. These can be found on cus.edu as well for those who don't know what the LEMOs are. The LEMOs are a misunderstood thing. People say that the LEMOs are a Lutheran purity law. They're not. They are more, Doug Spatel, my vice president, likes to talk about the LEMOs as a roadmap on how we should be living out our faith on college campuses. And that's really what it is. And that's what we use when we go do our visitations. Well, Don was not happy about some of that stuff. And ironically, when we got to the final version of what became 704B, about 90% of what Don wanted in there, we were able to get in there during the committee work going up to the convention. And Bernard Bull, if you go back and watch the convention, Bernard Bull, during the debate on 704B, went to the microphone and he said, it's very sad that at the table of presidents, there's an empty seat that was filled. He was referring to Don Christian. And he said, it's very sad that the things that Don really wanted, a lot of them got into this final version of 704B, but they had already voted to secede in November of 2022. So about 8 months ahead of the convention. And so the Synod tried in February and April. There was another voters of regents meeting in April of CTX where they affirmed their decision. You know, I want Concordia, Texas back in the CUS. I want to be on record. Make sure that gets on the thing there. I want Concordia, Texas back in the family. We're stronger together than we are apart. I want them to repent of their illegal secession, receive absolution, be restored to a church's school. There's a lot of Lutherans that were trained at CTX. I think there's about 8 or 10 students that got the Royal Shaft job when this occurred, because once they seceded and wouldn't take the Synod elected regents, we couldn't certify their candidates. And so those students that were going to graduate, the Council of Presidents and Peter Lang with colloquy and whatnot, and they're working on how to figure this out. I think maybe it's all done by now. I'm not on the Council of Presidents anymore, so I don't have the latest update. But I feel bad for those students. I want CTX back in. And I think the problem that I have with all of that is there's a lot of good Lutherans that have supported CTX over the years, given money to that institution, want church workers to come from that institution. We need a presence in Texas. I want to be clear about that. And now we don't have it. And we don't have it because a group of people illegally voted to do something that they never had the ability or the right to do.
What were the things that led to that voting, right? Because it didn't just happen out of thin air. So
no.
What was kind of the pushback on both sides?
Look,
like, were there doctrinal issues and concerns?
I don't care what anybody tells you. There were a lot of doctrinal things happening at CTX, disagreements, things that were talked about, positions that were taken, undertones of the role of women, right? LGBTQ kind of acceptance. That was by the way, that was a Portland problem too. That's one of the problems at Portland that kind of caused issues. We took a stand. Matt Harrison, God bless him, took a stand and said, we're not supporting this kind of stuff in liberal Portland, Oregon, right? The ironic thing is the state of Texas, the state of Texas, Governor Abbott outlawed DEI on the public college campuses of the state of Texas. And what is CTX doing now? They have kind of a DEI division on their campus.
Really?
And because they're a private college, they're not held to the same standards that the public school. But you ask the question, and the evidence is in what they're doing. I'm not casting dispersions on anybody. I'm simply saying, look what they're doing right now. And what they're doing right now are the very things that they were arguing with us against.
So the concerns were coming in from the LCMS side of, hey, we think these things are going on.
I think some people were concerned.
They said no, and then since the split, whatever you want to call it, has happened,
right out.
Then they're actually doing those things. Okay.
And I think the other thing, too, is nobody likes to be told what to do. Look, the Bible doesn't say you have to get roster status to serve God in the church, but the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, in Walking Together in Concordia, has said this is how we're going to do it. So if you want to be a part of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, this is what you got to do. I don't care whether you like it or not. I don't care whether I like it or not. When I was ordained, I vow to uphold the Synod's constitution and bylaws. And that means when we make a bylaw change that says you can't change your articles of incorporation without the permission of the Synod BOD, you can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's that simple. There are, and I've said this before, there are things that I don't necessarily think we need to have in our bylaws that we've agreed at Synod Convention to put in there. I have vowed to uphold them. I will uphold them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, nothing against Scripture. I will always land on the Scripture side anytime the bylaws come in conflict with the Scriptures. But you don't have to agree with everything in the bylaws. You vowed, if you're on the roster, to uphold them.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that my word, let my yes be yes and my no be no, according to the word of God. And I agreed to uphold them, and that's what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean,
it seems like a hyper-American issue of like this hyper-understanding of freedom. It's like, well, no one's going to tell me what to do. Well, it's like, well, someone's got to tell you what to do at some point.
Well,
and the church has to be structured in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that point is, I think, one of the greatest points in our modern political system problem, as well as in our church. In America, we have freedom, and we have freedom to speak. We have freedom to assemble, freedom to protest, and I'm all for those freedoms. But at some point, when does your freedom to do all these things impinge on my life and my ability?
Mm-hmm.
The LGBTQ stuff is a perfect example. If you choose to be gay and you choose to be in a homosexual relationship, I can speak against it theologically, but you have a right in this country to own your own home and to have a husband if you're a man, or a wife if you're a woman, and to live as a married couple under our government. And I support your right. I don't support what you do,
mm-hmm.
but I support the fact that you have freedom to do it. And the problem in our country, and even in our church, is these minorities with people who want to do these things want to force the rest of us to accept it. And that's the problem. You don't have a right in your freedom to force me to make it normal in my life. For me, it's against the word of God and against, for a homosexual couple. And I should not be forced to have my children exposed to it. I shouldn't be forced to have some transvestite or some drag queen reading, My Two Daddies at the public school with my kid. Where I was at in Pennsylvania, we didn't have the private school. We didn't have a private school. My kids had to go to public school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got involved in the public school to keep my kids safe from this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the problem in the church. They want to be a part of the Missouri Synod, but they don't want to follow what we've agreed in convention to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not the kind of guy to be rude about this, but if you don't want to follow what we've agreed to do in Synod, there's the door. Don't let it hit you. You should leave.
Mm-hmm.
You can't force the church to change to conform to your opinion when the church has spoken and said, this is how we're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that simple. And that's a perfect example of CTX.
Mm-hmm.
CTX illegally changed their articles of incorporation against the bylaws and justified it with fear that they were going to get amalgamated. I can tell you, as a member of the board of directors of CUS and now president, I have no evidence that there was ever a movement to consolidate CTX with any other Concordia.
So you think they wanted
I think they used it. I think Don Christian used a potential misunderstanding and possibly even a threat. I don't know what was said to him as the catalyst to say we're gone.
Mm-hmm. Tell me more, and you don't have to, but if you're willing to, tell me more about kind of this idea that you were talking about of, okay, so this idea of secession, right? Now you have your college. You were mentioning there's other, you were mentioning earlier the other ordination routes that Chloa and some of the other guys are going towards.
Yeah.
And kind of mentioning that they can't get into the LCMS right now.
Well, currently.
If you want to hash that idea out.
So the bylaws say that the Council of Presidents is the board of assignments for the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And I want you to know, I've done it 9 times. The Saturday before the week of call service, so the last week of April,
mm-hmm.
the council gathers on Saturday morning. It's the first order of business. Every man's name and every church they're going to is read and prayed for. And then the council votes to accept the slate as placement for the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Let me repeat that. Every man and every church is read and prayed for before the council votes on placing these men in these churches. And the bylaws say that the council is the authority of placement. They have to be recommended for placement by the seminaries. which is what you have the placement committee at the seminaries.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the interview process. Well, the council meets with the placement directors in February at the February meeting. And then at the April meeting, they vote and they place them at the services. I mean, this has been going on for years.
Mm-hmm.
I have the highest respect for the way we place men. And that includes SMP, M.Div, AR, all those guys come to that body for placement. Secondarily, we do the same thing for teachers and DCEs. Every name is read, every congregation they're going to, and they're all prayed over before the council votes. Once the council votes, they are placed as the body of placement at the Missouri Synod.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be recognized by a official institution of the Synod to get even to the Council of Presidents to be placed. So ILT and any of that other silliness that they're trying to do, they're never going to get accredited in the, they're never going to get approved in the Missouri Synod for placement. So even if they graduate from the ILT seminary and get an M.Div, they can't get placed in the Missouri Synod because it's not an authorized avenue for entrance into the church. It's just that simple.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not complicated.
So what do you think the purpose is of pushing young LCMS people towards that type of a route?
There is only one reason to push somebody towards ILT, and that is to circumvent the process in the Missouri Synod. Number one, they can do everything online, fully online. They don't have to leave. And that's one of the criticisms. That's one of that's one of the biggest criticisms, I think, of the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that it's a economic thing. It's easier to do it at home. It's faster and it's cheaper. And I think our own seminaries, Fort Wayne and St. Louis, have understood that we've got to figure out residential education is the best and the highest form. But we've got to provide avenues for guys to go into ministry that is not 4 years moving to the seminary. SMP is one of those routes. AR is one of those routes. Mission Training Center out in CUI is one of those routes. But the truth of the matter is nothing replaces residential seminary.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, this is not just a tagline. We have two of the best seminaries in the world.
Mm-hmm.
We have some of the most educated clergy in the world. We're not Baptists. We don't just wake up and say, I'm a pastor today, ordain me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so there's a standard. Is there other standards? Yes, we could have another standard. I don't think having another standard is beneficial to the church. I think having another standard waters down actually what is the content.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the real issue for me at a Concordia level. You know, I mentioned this possible 90-degree masters for HLC. Well, I don't think it would be watering it down if you took away some of the electives and let them get that stuff at the seminary and just did the core curriculum to get their 90 credits, right? And yet we do have some of this. I also think that we need to look at the seminary education. Do we need 3 full years residential? What about the AR guys that do all their education, then they go to vicarage and get a delayed vicarage or go somewhere else, and then they never come back to the seminary? I don't think you have to come back to the seminary necessarily to have a very deep education. Mm-hmm. And so maybe instead of having guys go out in third year and come back, all the moving costs, all the this, all the that, so all I'm saying is all these things I think are on the table for conversations.
Yeah.
I am 100% a supporter of our system, of our Concordia system, of our 2 seminaries, of the residential nature of them. We have the best theologians in the business. We have the best seminaries in the business. I would argue we have the best preparation at our colleges in the business.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's an ongoing evaluation. I think we have to constantly look at what are we doing, and can we do it more efficiently? Can we do it better? Can we achieve the same goal with adjustments for certain guys? The problem is, like SMP, the exceptions always become the norm.
Mm-hmm. Water runs down. Yeah.
And I said this when SMP first came out. I was direly against it. I mean, I was direly against it because I knew. Let me give you a bylaw thing here. The SMP program says that SMP pastors must remain at their location of specialization. They can't move around, except if another call with the same specialization somewhere else at another church came up, they could take that call. Or if a call from another congregation or another district happened, the 2 DPs could agree and that transfer could occur, even if it's not the same specialization.
Hmm.
So you really think there's not DPs out there that are moving these SMP pastors all over the place? I got into it one council meeting because I had fellow colleagues in my geographic area. I won't mention the name of the Eastern District. I mean Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You think is that a problem with you, Bennett? I don't like the fact that these DPs took advantage of the rule and they abused the system, and they then created a whole nother class of pastors that moved around the country. And that's why we had the big blow up in 2016 and 2019 about licensed lay deacons. In 2016, the LLD thing was, it was huge, and we got rid of the LLD thing. Well, the SMP thing got fixed in 2019. And again, also in 2023. I think the SMP program is a pretty good program now. And you got when I authorized guys for SMP in the English district, I always encourage them to go GPC, because general pastoral certification allowed them to take calls like you and I can anywhere in the Synod. And a lot of the guys that I authorized have gone through GPC. And I appreciate that, because you get the languages in the last 2 years. And, again, when you got the best system in the business, why not do it?
Yeah.
Take advantage of it. So, I mean, we have routes to ministry. I was just reading a CCM opinion on the plane on the way here about this very topic, and about SMP and faculty, adjuncts, and all that stuff. And so it's a hot topic. I mean, a lot of guys think, I want to serve the church the fastest, the quickest, the easiest way that I can do it, because God is calling me. How can you? I've had men say this to me. How can you say God is not calling me? I feel the call. I've heard the call. My response is, hang up. It's the wrong number. If you're not, if
you're not willing to do the work
for the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, hang up. It's the wrong number. Because if you're not willing to do what we have as a church body in convention decided this is how we're going to do it, if you're not willing to do that, then you're not getting a call. It's your own kind of thing. I'm not saying God's not motivating you. I believe wholeheartedly is motivating you. But if you want to be a part of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, we've agreed to do it this way. Right, wrong, or indifferent doesn't matter. This is how we've agreed to do it. You want to be a part of it? You got to do it this way. And so that's what I would tell all those keyboard warriors on Facebook. I would tell all those people on the internet who are writing all this vicious stuff, about the current administration, about CUS, about me, about whoever. Wake up. You have a choice. You are a member of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. We believe in synodical convention is the highest authority. When we come together and we make decisions, that is the rule of our agreed upon Concordia. Look it up. And if you don't want to be a part of that Concordia, that's fine. I'll still be good friends with you. But you got to go, because you can't force us to do something different when we've agreed to do it this way. And so CTX, again, I want them back. I hope that they'll come back. I hope we can get rid of this lawsuit. It's way too much money for no reason at all, because they don't need to be doing this. I understand their desire. My prayer is that we can resolve this and they can become a school of the church again. I was asked at the convention, I presented 704B as the floor committee, and I was asked by a guy in the back of the assembly if I could, wave a magic wand, how would this play out? And I simply said, return the university to its mother. It's not yours to take. The place exploded. Matthew was like, no, it's simple, guys. Give us back what you took, and we're good. We're good. Put the school back in CUS. We're good. We can figure it out. We can argue. We can talk. We can debate all you want. But the school is an institution of the LCMS and the CUS, and it should be returned. That's my position. So,
well, let's take a quick break, and then I want to jump into the pastoral leadership.
Very good.
All right. And Bennett says, we're back. Let's jump into just leadership and pastoral leadership, which you published a book on, correct?
Yeah. Look, I taught for the Fort Wayne Seminary class in the DMin program on pastoral administration and pastoral leadership. I got my doctorate in 2012. And one of the things in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod seminary curriculum, whether it's pre-seminary to college or seminary, that I've always said is, there's really only one book that they use for leadership. And they only teach like a week part of a 8-week, 10-week course on leadership because of all the other stuff that's packed into the church. And my contention is one of the greatest deficiencies we have with men in the ministry. And I say that as a district president for 9 years. One of the greatest deficiencies are the leadership skills that make great leaders successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't say that because I don't think men have the capabilities. I think men haven't been modeled or taught how to be an effective leader. I think there's a lot of theologians that don't believe that leadership is even a part of the Bible, meaning that pastoral ministry and leadership, they're not connected. But that's why I chose the title Pastoral Leadership as the title, Shepherding God's People.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's pastoral leadership. The contention on the book is pastoral leadership is pastoral care. That's my contention. And if you see the picture,
Mm-hmm.
a shepherd carrying, this is the 99, the shepherd goes after the one. This is where I got that from, right? And so the idea of a pastoral leader for me is actually giving pastoral care. There is no higher form of pastoral leadership and pastoral care than word and sacrament ministry, preaching and administering the sacraments. And so I've gotten all kinds of reactions to this book since I've put it out, to some guys in the far right of the church, like, there's no need for this kind of talk, and this is church growth. This is not church growth. The most effective pastors in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod that I've been around, that I've been bishop to, or that I've been exposed to, are great leaders. So I contend, and I think there's very clear evidence that pastoral leadership is pastoral care. And the better you are at doing your job in pastoral care, the more natural you'll be a pastoral leader.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do I mean by that? In the first chapter of the book, I go through a number of biblical stories about biblical characters and their leadership flaws. I mean, for instance, I start out with, we go right to Adam. Adam is a perfect example of a failure in leadership. When the biblical text in Genesis says, and he was with her in the garden. This is Eve.
Mm-hmm.
When Satan was talking to Eve, the Bible gives indication that Adam was right next to her. Not like just in the vicinity, but the Bible says, and he was with her in the garden. And the biblical account of Genesis never gives Adam any moment where he interjects and corrects Satan,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when Satan asks Eve, did God really say to you that you cannot eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? You're a clergyman. What is the answer to that question?
Mm-hmm.
Did God speak to Eve and say, do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil?
Mm-hmm.
Yes or no? You tell me. No. He spoke to
Adam.
Mm-hmm. The command was given to Adam, thus the head of household, all this stuff. And so Eve, being at that time not sinful, the answer to the question by Eve had to be, well, of course God did not say that to me.
Mm-hmm.
But the dumb one, Adam, was standing right there, who God did say that to, and the scriptures never have an account of Adam correcting the serpent.
Mm-hmm.
So his failure of leadership was fear to exert his role. How many times in pastoral leadership have you been in a situation where lay people have been waiting for the pastor to say how he feels, thinks, or what he believes?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of guys who are great preachers, great teachers, but they're afraid to lead. They're afraid to be criticized for making a decision. I don't care who you are. If you're in a position of leadership, pastoral, a pastor at a church or something, people view you as the leader. And if you just take a step back and simply say, that's not my job, it's everybody else's job, you're failing. I could go on and on in terms of the characters, but I'll say,
please do. That's a good example.
So Adam is blame. Adam blames Eve. What does he say to God in the garden? It was the woman you gave me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a failure of leadership, blaming others, right? Moses was trained in the court of Pharaoh. I mean, we know the story. He was a Hebrew. Mom put him in the river. Pharaoh's daughter got him. But Pharaoh, the Old Testament text about Moses gives every indication that Moses was favored by Pharaoh.
Mm-hmm.
He was given positions of authority and responsibility. He was taught how to lead. He was taught but Moses had doubt and fear. Where do we look at this? This is the burning bush. Jesus, the angel of God, or God himself, the Father, says to Moses, take off your sandals. The ground you're on is holy. I have a task for you. Go to Pharaoh and tell him, let my people go. What does Moses say to God? I can't speak.
Mm-hmm.
Doubt and fear. And yet he's been trained. There is nobody better to free the people of Egypt than Moses, right? And what does God do to overcome Moses' fear and doubt? He says, you got a brother who's got a big mouth. I'll let him be your mouthpiece, Aaron. My brother Tim is 11 months older than me. I'm better looking. I got a bigger mouth, but he would be Moses and I would be Aaron because I would do all the talking. Gideon. This is one that many people don't talk about. Gideon's great leadership failure was hesitation. He hesitated. And these are all things that any leader goes through, these kind of things. David. What was David's a big sin, right? David, and that whole story with David and Bathsheba always gets me. What woman is going to stand on top of the roof of her house and shower knowing that the king can see her? I mean, the Bible said, it was in view of the king. What did David do? David sent her husband to the front lines, the Bible says, in order for him to die in battle, so that David could have Bathsheba as his own. Well, David had great guilt because when Nathan the prophet came to David, and Nathan told the story of the rich man taking the poor man's, goat or sheep, what did David respond with? That man should die. And what did Nathan say? You are that man. Guilt was David's leadership failure. Jonah's another one, right? Jonah's great leadership failure was stubbornness. God said to Jonah, you're going to go to Nineveh. No, I'm not. Can you imagine the size fish God would have to use to swallow my big ass, myself? I mean, really. I mean, serious. I mean, Jonah, it's amazing when you think about what Jonah's stubbornness did and how God fixed Jonah's leadership stubbornness. Elijah was discouraged. All this bad stuff was happening to Elijah. So his leadership failure was a moments of discouragement. And Elijah is one of those great stories, again, where God does great things in the failings of the leadership struggles of, in this case, Elijah. Isaiah is another one. Isaiah, the great prophet, some of the great Christological prophecies are in Isaiah. What was Isaiah's leadership failure? He felt unworthy. I'm not worthy. And there's a lot of leaders that God has put in pastoral positions who they don't feel worthy. And so they don't want to lead because they don't feel worthy. Let me use one more from the New Testament. I'll do two from the New Testament. Peter. What was Peter's leadership failure? Overconfidence. At the table on the night when Jesus was betrayed, Peter said, may it not be I, Lord, I would never betray you. And Jesus said to Peter, this night before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. No, Lord, never will it be me. We know the story. And then finally, Thomas and doubt. I will not believe unless I put my fingers in the holes in his hands and the hole in his side. Thomas's leadership failure was all about doubt. And so these are stories. I actually, in the book, I talk about the actual biblical story. And then I talk about the leadership failure that each of those characters have. And the whole point in going through that chapter is to tell every one of us pastors that you're going to have these moments of unworthiness, of doubt, of this. That doesn't mean you're not a good leader, but you got to learn to overcome them. You got to learn to fight the fear. Satan is great at taking your fear and exploiting it. And when you're a pastor, look, when you're up front in front of church, all the eyes are on you. That's just the way it goes. And you either accept it and move on, or you're controlled by it. And there are some guys I know to this very day, they've been in the ministry 15, 20, 30 years. Every time they climb into the pulpit, it's a terrifying event for them. Others, it's like putting on a pair of shoes and going for a walk. It's natural. I don't think either way is good, right, or wrong, or bad, or indifferent. I just think it's the gift God gives you. And so we all have our struggles and our failures. And when it comes to pastoral leadership, it's best to identify what your failure is and build some strength around you to help either modify your own self or put people in places that can help your deficiencies. I think, another section of the book that I think is really important is leading according to God's plan. God's plan for the pastor is word and sacrament ministry, visitation. All that comes up under the guides of caring for God's people. That's why the book says shepherding and caring for God's people. Another chapter that I like to talk about is acting the part. Acting the part. I'm not your normal pastor in the sense of, I'm not overly pious in that way. I wear my collar when I'm working on a regular basis, but I don't sleep in it like some of my brothers do. And yet when people find out that I'm a clergy person, they're kind of surprised because I'm not that normal clergy type, priestly type guy, but yet I scored very high in protectiveness. So my point is, much like if you're in need, have you ever seen the movie Blind Side with Michael Orr?
Yeah.
He was the Baltimore Ravens offensive lineman. They have that movie and a scene in the movie where he's with his younger, the family that adopted him, the younger brother, and they get in a car accident and he reaches out and stops the boy from going into the thing. And he's so big and strong that the bag explodes in his arm. And protectiveness, Michael Orr scored very high in protectiveness. And I think that's something that a shepherd has to have. You've got to act the part. So when your people are in need of a shepherd and a protector, you got to be that guy. A quick story on the Good Shepherd Sunday. The shepherd leaves the 99 to go look for the one who's lost. I had a member in my church who had been called up to military service in Iraq, and long story short, he came back for his 2-week hiatus and never told his wife and kids that he was back in the country, but he told me. And they were having some marriage problems, and that was that day I got on a plane and I flew down to where he was at to confront him. So I've lived leaving the 99 to go with the one. I've lived it as a pastor. And to me, that's acting the part. It's not just talking about doing pastoral work. It's living it. It's a joke on the Council of Presidents. The chapter that I want everybody to read is chapter 9, because that's the finance chapter. It's just a list of vocabulary words and how it applies to church finances. And pastors don't have time to learn this stuff unless you have a MBA or a BA from undergraduate. And so, this was a life work of mine that was in my brain for about a decade. And then when I was on the Council of Presidents, the president of CPH was sitting next to me at a council meeting. This was back in 2020. Let's see, this is 2022. And I said, are you guys going to start doing some leadership stuff? Bruce Kintz, the former president of CPH, was like, no, we don't want to do that. Well, he's like, yeah, let's do it. And if you don't know, CPH has done a number of different leadership things. And so they agreed with my proposal. I wrote a exhaustive outline, and the book is done. And really it's really a joyful, but it's written in a Bible study way. So at the end of every chapter, there's reflections and questions. So I've had pastors actually teach this in their church for a Bible study. And I've had Winkles, use the book for Winkles. I had a publishing company over in England, a religious publishing company in England, put it in their bookstore. And I've gotten some folks in England who have used this in their church, who have reached out to me. So yeah, it's. I pray that it's a gift to the church. I don't think it has all the answers. I don't think it's an exhaustive work, but it's something that kind of gets to the point, highlights certain things about leadership, and moves on. And again, it's written as from my standpoint as a parish pastor, but as a district president. And I have a lot of examples in here of the lay people in my life. Ralph Hauser, who I told you about earlier. Yeah. Ralph's in the book here, and my people at Peace Lutheran Church in McMurray, when I finished the book, I went back and I preached for Justin Schmidt, the pastor. And I said, you get a free book if you can find yourself in one of the stories in the book. Well, 2 reasons I did that. 1, I want them to read it. And 2, if they could find it, I'll give them a free copy of the book. 2 of my parishioners immediately in chapter 1 found themselves, that I was referencing them. I never use any names. There's no names. Yeah. But they know who they are. I'll tell you a real quick story. Pittsburgh, if you've never been to Pittsburgh, it's mountainous, rolly hills, left, right. There's the state of Michigan, and even here in Minnesota, you can make 3 rights and it's a left, right? Well, in Pennsylvania, if you make 3 rights in Pittsburgh, you'll end up in West Virginia. It's just the way it goes. And so I had a member call me and say, my dad's in the hospital downtown. I'm from Detroit. I don't know where it's at. I had a member by the name of Bob Grimm. He was my associate pastor. When I got there, he was 75. I buried him at 95. And he used to drive me to all my visitations because he was a furniture delivery guy for 50 years in Pittsburgh. So he knew every road. This is how the phone call went. This is December of 2000. I said, Bob, Pastor Hardy, hey, Pastor. I said, I got to go to so-and-so hospital. I said, I need to get there quick. So-and-so is in trouble. He goes, okay, this is what you do. Go down such and such road. When you get to make a right. I said, Bob, it says one way, don't enter. He goes, you go that road. You go down that road. You'll cut 20 minutes off your drive. If you get a ticket, Pastor, I will pay the ticket. Go down that road. I got there in like 10 minutes. Well, after I learned Pittsburgh, I learned. It would have been 20 minutes had I gone the legal way. I had, and Bob, he was just a magical. He visited every shut-in every Sunday after church. Nobody asked him to do it. If I could, I did one thing wrong in my ministry that I wish I could go back and fix, and that's record Bob doing visitations with me, because we would go visit shut-ins, and for the first 20 minutes, he would visit them, and then he'd get up and go, "Okay, Pastor, give him communion." And that was my visits for the first 5 years. Bob talked to people, and I learned how to visit people from Bob Grimm, may his soul rest in peace. And he was, I guarantee you, there's not a pastor who does visits better than Bob Grimm. And he's in the book quite a bit. Because I learned so much nonverbal pastoral skills from a layman, and just watching him love his neighbor, just love his neighbor. And I think that's the thing. When it comes to us pastors, we gotta love each other, and we get isolated, and we don't want to look past people's failings, colleagues, brothers, and we want to just constantly throw up shields. And I think the biblical command to love your neighbor as yourself, we need to spend a little bit more time on that one. The greatest command is love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind. But the second is like it, the Bible says, and love your neighbor as yourself. In our Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, we could benefit by that one hugely.
If there's one leadership aspect from that book that you think is maybe the most wanting right now, what would you highlight?
Well, when you say wanting, you mean from other people? That would they want, like
be.
a layperson seeing that they would need in their pastor?
Well, maybe as a weakness, an area that we would in most areas there needs to be improvement. Yeah,
I'd say if I could do two instead of one, because I think they're separate but they're connected. Number one is communication. My senior pastor at at Our Savior in Heartland, Chris Toma, he writes these e-newses every Sunday, and it's like 50 pages long. And I only read it so I can see if he's talking about me. But that's a joke, Chris, if he's listening. But communication is one of the biggest things. Pastors believe that preaching is all it takes or teaching is all it takes. You got to communicate with your people on the regular. I mean, if it's weekly, multiple times in a week sometimes, pastors do not understand. We live in a world of communication. People are used to getting texts. They're used to getting emails. We've got to do a better job at communicating. And by the way, 50% of our churches have less than 50 people in them in the Missouri Synod. Small or large doesn't matter. You can't expect that your people are up to speed on what's going on in the church, in the community, in the parish. You got to over-communicate. That'd be number one. The second one, and this is a biblical leadership principle that I think we just do not understand. We're afraid of it. Uplifting others to be leaders, uplifting others to be successful. As a parish pastor here with Duncan, you two are only as successful as the lay people who are around you. I don't care how good you guys are. And I've known Duncan for a long time. I don't care how good you are. You are limited to the people who are around you. And unless you're uplifting others to be good leaders and encouraging them, and giving credit to those people who are doing hard jobs and work, you're not doing your job as the leader. Because uplifting others is something we want attention, but we don't want attention. And I look at it this way. I've been asked many times. I'll celebrate 25 years on December 10th of this year, and people have said to me, Pastor, what do you want to be known for? What's your legacy? For me, my legacy is very simple. I want people to say he believed what he taught us. That's it. Nothing more. I want people to say Ed Hardy believed in what he taught. And as far as I'm concerned, that's enough, because the rest of it is going to be what it is. But I want people to know that I believe in the gospel message. I believe in the biblical things that we discuss, we teach, we confess. I believe in forgiveness. I believe in the resurrection. I believe in the crucifixion. These are the things that are the most important to me. And I want my people to know that the guy who's teaching them believes what he's teaching. And as a leader, I believe that my pastor believed it. And it's why I am the guy I am today, is because my pastor, Ralph Fisher, he used to end every sermon the same way. And by the way, as a theologian now, he probably was a little bit on the wrong side, but he used to end every sermon with faithful, 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 or suffer, suffer, suffer. That's not a good, you shouldn't be ending a sermon that way. That kind of gives a mixture of law and gospel in a way that But for me, as a young, impressionable mind by Pastor Fisher, I just heard faithful, 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 faithful.
Mm-hmm.
It's all I heard because he believed what he taught us.
Yeah.
And so it had an impression on me. He told me in third grade, I'm going to be a pastor. And I said, no, Pastor, I'm going to play football for the Lions. Thank God that didn't work out until the last 2 years. I mean, the last 2 years, I don't want to be in a Lion.
Well,
I'd be in a Lions team last year. Okay, Bennett, you've been watching football? They beat the Minnesota Vikings. I just want to let you know that. They beat the Packers. They beat the Bears. They beat almost everybody except in the playoff. But anyways.
You could have applied with all the injuries we had this year.
I know.
They were looking.
I know. But I told my pastor, no, I'm not going to be a pastor. And he kept on me.
Mm-hmm.
As I said earlier tonight, he saw the Spirit resting on me. And I've seen this going around the church. When I go visit people, I can see the Spirit resting on young men in the church. I got a guy in my church right now. He's head of our stewardship. And every time he comes up to do an announcement, I always say to him, right in front of church, when are you going to seminary? When are you going to seminary? Well, it's a big joke now. Well, you can ask my wife. You have to talk to her. So I went up to her. I said, when are you going to take him to seminary? Mm-hmm. Well, so my pastor did it to me. I'm on my 9th seminarian. Alex was my first, by the way. Alex Sable, really? your classmate, Alex Sable.
Great guy.
My first confirmand that I ever confirmed. And my kids call him my mini-me. My oldest son grew up with him kind of as a brother, and Alex, his whole family, his brother Nick, his mom Chris, and Joe, his dad, and his grandfather Roy. When I came to Pittsburgh, we just clicked. Mm-hmm. And that young man is really a joy for me because, when you're a pastor and you see the first kid you ever confirmed is doing exactly what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And he's doing a really good job, by the way. I mean, I was his bishop for about 5 of those 6, those years.
I talk to him pretty regularly. He's a good guy. He cares for his people.
He loves his people.
And
they love him.
Yeah, I believe.
They love him, and he knows what he's doing. He knows how to lead. I mean, he had a good pastor. He showed him. He had a really hell of a good pastor. I'm probably one of the best in the business, Bennett, if you want me to just give you my opinion. But, when you emulate good, I emulated good, right? And so when you're emulating good and you're using the gifts and talents that God gave you, plus he married this, wonderful gal.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of doing the wedding.
Did you?
Yeah. I married them. And, it was Christmas. It was Christmas time when they got married. It was really cool. My kids were all there, like in some way, this is big brother, Alex. It was great. And again, I'm close with the family, and it's awesome as a pastor when you can see young men taking up the cause. I'm not going to be here forever. Might not make it past tonight. You never know. But there are others that you leave an imprint on. And that's what I think pastoral leadership is all about. You do the best you can. You take the failings as they come, and you give thanks to God for the successes, and you pray that he works the good for those who believe and trust in him. I mean, that's all I can do. I'm nothing special. I can promise you that. Well, I mean, I don't know. If you want to wrestle, we could do that.
We could move the cameras around. We could have a little record it.
Well, listen, as I said to you at the beginning before we started, I am a fan of Thunderdome, and I think in the church, if we have conflict, we just need to have a synodical Thunderdome. Mm-hmm. 2 men enter, and the man that leaves is right. And I am so tired of these Facebook warriors. Any one of these idiots that want to sit behind a keyboard and call names and have no courtesy to follow the 8th commandment and pick up the phone or show up at my workplace and look me in the face. Mm-hmm. Because the problem is they're all engorged with this bravery behind the keyboard. But it takes twice as much courage to look a man in the face and say the same thing. Mm-hmm. And this is the joy that I had in the council presidents. We had a lot of disagreements, but I could look brothers in the face and we could have a disagreement.
Yeah.
I still wish we'd have done Thunderdome because a few district presidents who are retired now might have retired sooner. You going to get rid of that one for me, Bennett? You're going to highlight that one. That's going to be
That's going to be our clip.
What's his name?
That'll be right at the beginning.
D. Young will put that, right?
D. Young's going to put that there.
You're going to put that on the last 5 minutes. Hardy starts getting loopy. Yeah. No, but I mean, it's serious. I mean, I with it all serious, there is something to be said about that. The old synodical way of disagreement is you fought like cats and dogs, and then you went out and had a beer at night.
Yeah.
You were brothers. You left the room. You left the room as brothers, even though you had just one heck of a drag out fight. 2 men entered, 1 man left, but you walk together as brothers. And I ascribe to that philosophy to this day in many of the guys on the council presidents. I don't agree with all of them, but we had great relationships. To this day, I have great relationships with them. And, I thank God for that time and that ability to have that theological. And they are wrestling matches, by the way. They are. Yep. They're not physical hand-to-hand combat, but they are exchanges of thought. They are back and forth. And so, yeah.
Well, Dr. Jamison Hardy, this has been great. Should we go another hour? Or?
I got to work tomorrow.
Drive.
I got a long drive tonight, but I got a whole day tomorrow.
Your time already?
Yeah, that's all right. I feel good.
Yeah,
I could go another hour, but I better not, because next thing you know, you'll have me saying really stupid stuff.
All right. Well, hey, God bless. Cheers.
Hey, thanks.